I've always hated spiders. Not in the casual way most people say they hate them, like when one shows up in a shower and they shiver or jump and then forget about it 5 minutes later. I mean a deep, physical, reflexive kind of hatred, the kind that lives in your chest like a hot coal. The kind that makes your skin crawl just thinking about the shape of them, the way they move, the way their legs look like thin wires bent in all the wrong places. My hatred of spiders is the kind that makes my breathing tighten if I see one, even a small one, from across the room. It's a hatred born of trauma, not preference. I wasn't born this way. Something happened, and that something is why I haven't gone on a hunting trip or spent more than 5 minutes in the woods since I was 12 years old. My dad was big on hunting, not in the cartoonish sense, not a caricature of a man in camo with a beer gut and a 12-gauge slung over his shoulder talking about the good old days. He was quieter about it, more thoughtful, but just as committed. He saw it as tradition, a way to bond, a way to teach values, patience, focus. I think part of him also liked the feeling of legacy, like passing something down to me and my older brother the same way it had been passed to him. I never took to it the way my brother did. I hated sitting still for hours. I didn't enjoy killing things. It wasn't some moral crusade. I'm not a vegetarian or an activist or anything. But killing something for a photo or a story at the dinner table just felt wrong to me. If we ate it, maybe I'd feel different, but we didn't. We mounted the heads and told the stories and let the meat go to some friend or distant cousin who had more freezer space than we did. That year, it was a November trip. Cold, but not bitter yet. Leaves fallen, air damp. We loaded up the truck early in the morning while it was still dark. Me, my dad, my brother Jason, and my uncle Ken. There was a kind of unspoken choreography to these trips. The gear was always packed the same way. The guns in their cases, the ammo locked separately. Food in a cooler. Water jugs. Thermos of black coffee that smelled like burned rubber to me. They all wore the same faded orange vests and flannel shirts and jeans. I always wore whatever coat my mom handed me and carried my Game Boy in my pocket like a secret. The drive out was long and quiet. I remember watching the frost trace lines along the edges of the windshield, listening to Jason and Ken talk about some football game I didn't care about. My dad drove in silence, focused like he always did. I played Pokemon until the battery light started blinking red, then shut it off to save power. We reached the hunting grounds sometime around sunrise. It was a big patch of private forest owned by a friend of Ken's. A lot of tall trees, dead underbrush, soft ground, birds calling from high branches. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood rot. They gave me the radio like they always did and told me to stay in one of the ground blinds. It was more like a shack than a blind, made of plywood and brush. It had a small window, a bench, and barely enough room to stretch your legs. The others went off deeper into the woods, splitting up in different directions. I had no idea where any of them were once they left. That was part of the point, I guess. Cover more ground, keep quiet, don't spook the deer. The idea was I'd stay in the blind and let them know over the radio if I saw any movement. It was supposed to be practice, part of learning how to hunt. But I never wanted to learn. I brought my backpack with snacks, a couple books I never planned to read, and my Game Boy. That was all I cared about. I planned to sit in the blind, stay warm, and grind levels until someone called it day. It didn't take long for the boredom to hit. After about an hour, my fingers were cold, the bench was hard, and I was out of patience. The Game Boy game, Pokemon Blue, I think, was at that point where the battles felt like homework. Just the same thing over and over. No excitement, no surprise. I turned it off and stuck it back in my backpack. I started digging through it, looking for something to distract myself. I think I had a pack of gum, maybe some candy bars. As I pulled stuff out, I heard a noise, a sort of soft whoosh. Not loud, but close. It was strange enough that I stopped moving and just listened. I didn't hear it again at first, just wind through the trees and the occasional rustle of leaves. But then, there was again, whoosh, like something falling, or shifting, like someone shaking out a sheet, but lower, thicker. I stepped outside the blind and looked around. Nothing, just trees and brush. No deer, no people. I walked around the side of the blind, the opposite side from the small window, and that's when I saw it. The entire back wall of the blind was moving. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It just looked like the surface of the wood was shifting, flowing. Then I realized it wasn't the wall that was moving. It was the spiders. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Daddy long legs, all clumped together, their thin, wiry legs tangled with each other. They weren't in a web, just a seething, clinging mass, covering every inch of the wall from the ground to the roof. I froze. My brain went blank for a second. I'd seen spiders before, obviously, but never like this. Never in that kind of number. Never moving like they shared one body. I wanted to run, but I had no idea where to go. I didn't know where the camp was. I hadn't paid attention on the way out. They had driven me out to this spot, told me to stay put. I didn't have a map, just a radio. And even if I called them, I had no idea how far away they were. I felt trapped, pinned, so I panicked. I remembered I had a can of off in my backpack, and I had a lighter. I've been told not to play with it, obviously, but I kept it with me because it felt grown up, like a tool. I grabbed both. The plan, if you can even call it that, came together in a split-second burst of adrenaline. Spray the off, light it, burn the spiders away, clear the wall, solve the problem. I stood a few feet back, shook the can, pointed it at the massive spiders, and clicked the lighter. It worked instantly. A thin, bright ribbon of flame shot out and touched the spiders. The effect was immediate. The second a fire hit them, they let go. All of them, at once. I didn't even think that was possible, but they did. The whole wall seemed to detach from itself and come flying toward me. Not crawling, not falling, flying. And the worst part was that I had made the fire blow downwind, toward me. So what came to me wasn't just a swarm of spiders. It was a swarm of flaming spiders. They hit me like ash from a fire pit, only alive. Legs crawling across my skin, some still burning. I screamed, louder than I've ever screamed in my life. I dropped the can, dropped the lighter, fell backward onto the ground and rolled. I remember the smell of my own jacket starting to singe. I tore it off, then my shirt, then my pants. I didn't care. I was still screaming. I felt them in my hair, on my neck, down the back of my pants. I stripped down to my underwear and kept rolling in the dirt, kicking at the leaves, swatting myself. My skin burned in spots, from the flame or the bites or both. I have no idea how long it lasted. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute, long enough to feel like hours. When I finally stopped moving, I was breathing so hard I felt dizzy. My arms were scratched, my legs were shaking, my hands were red and shaking. I was half naked, filthy and freezing. I grabbed the radio from the blind, which miraculously hadn't caught fire, and called my dad. I didn't think about what I was saying. I just told him come get me, that we were going home, that I wasn't doing this anymore. He didn't ask questions. He must have heard the way my voice sounded. Maybe he thought I'd been attacked by an animal. I don't know. But he showed up 20 minutes later, and when he found me curled up inside the blind, wrapped in the emergency blanket from my pack, shaking and crying, he didn't say a word. He just helped me into the truck, wrapped me in a sleeping bag, and drove us back to the cabin without a word. I showered for over an hour. My skin stung. I found dead spiders in my socks, in my hair, in my backpack. My legs had burn marks from the fire. Nothing deep, but bad enough to blister. I threw the Game Boy in the trash. I didn't care anymore. I sat on the edge of the bunk bed that night and stared at the floor. My brother asked what had happened. I didn't answer. Neither did my dad. The next morning, we left. We didn't stay the full week like we usually did. We went home early, and nobody talked about it again. But I couldn't forget. I had nightmares for years. Therapy helped some. The therapist called it a trauma response. Said I had a form of PTSD. I guess that makes sense. I've seen war vets with less vivid flashbacks. The image of that wall of spiders, of them flying at me, burning, is something I still see in the back of my eyes when I close them sometimes. It's there when I see a spider on the wall, when I feel something brush my skin, when I smell bug spray, sometimes even when I see smoke. It all comes back. I don't go camping anymore. I don't go into the woods. I don't even garden. I live in the city now, and I keep my apartment clean and sealed. I check corners. I vacuum religiously. I don't even like fake spiders on Halloween. I hate them. All of them. I don't care that they're harmless, that they're good for the environment, that daddy long legs can't even bite humans. I don't care. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear footsteps upstairs. It's not creaks or shifting wood. It's footsteps. Steady, heavy, one side of the room to the other. Then silence. Maybe it happens once, maybe twice, but never more, and never less. It started when I was around 14. That was when everything changed. My grandparents started sleeping in separate bedrooms. Some age thing or snoring or whatever reason they had. I was moved into a different room on the first floor. It was quieter, they said. More space, they said. I didn't think anything of it until a few weeks into that arrangement. The room they gave me was directly under the upstairs room that had always made me uneasy. Even as a kid, before I had any reason, I just hated that part of the house. I never liked going upstairs alone. I used to make excuses when I had to grab something from up there. I'd ask my grandma to come with me or wait until someone else went up so I could tag along. I couldn't explain it. The moment my foot hit that top step, I always felt like I was being watched. There was one room in particular. It was long and narrow, and I can picture it perfectly. When you open the door, there are closets immediately to your left and right. The bed sits smack in the middle of the room, just far enough from either end that it feels awkward. A window stares at you from the far wall, across from the door, framed by pale curtains that never move no matter how open the window is. I'd only been in there a few times. Once to help my grandma with laundry, once to find an old box of family photos. But I always rushed. I never stayed longer than I had to. My grandparents once told me that the sons of the previous owner had seen something strange in that room. A gorilla, they said. It came out of one of the closets, danced around the room, and went back in. I laughed when I first heard it. I mean, how ridiculous is that? A gorilla. I wrote it off as a kid's overactive imagination or some inside joke I wasn't on. But that was before I had to sleep under that room. The first time it happened, I was wide awake. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I had my phone in my hand, scrolling bored. It was probably around midnight. Everyone in the house was asleep. No TVs on, no murmuring voices. Just quiet. That deep, unsettling silence old houses get at night. Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. It started faintly on one side of the ceiling above my bed. Each step sounded casual, like someone just walking across the room. Not rushing, not stomping, just moving. The sound passed directly over me and stopped at the far side of the room. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might give me away. I waited. Nothing. After a few minutes, I got up and went to my grandpa's room. I didn't want to admit I was scared, so I just said I thought I heard something upstairs. He told me it was just the house creaking, that it did that sometimes when it cooled down at night. Then he turned the dining room light on for me, probably just to make me feel better. I went back to my room, still scared, but a little more settled. I lay down again, blankets pulled to my chin, then started again. Same pace, same sound, but this time it started from the window side, the end where it had stopped. The footsteps walked straight over me again and stopped by the door. Then 5 seconds of dead silence. And then it began coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence on the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. More silence. But this time on my floor. I didn't move. I just stared at my door. The dining room light was on. I could see the edge of it bleeding into my room, just enough to make out the shape of the doorway. Then everything started to twist. It was like my vision was shaking. My head felt light, like I was going to pass out. I thought it was just fear messing with my body. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate scratching sound. It was inside my room. I knew where it was coming from, too. My grandpa had this wooden gun case in the corner of the room. It was closed and the door was always just slightly loose, so it would knock gently against the frame if you moved it. I heard that exact sound, a long scratch, like a fingernail or something sharp dragging down the wood. Then the faintest tap of the door moving. Again and again. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. I took a deep breath and forced it. My grandpa came running in seconds later. I didn't even care if he believed me. I was just glad he was there. He didn't hear anything. He didn't see anything. He told me again that the house just creaks. That maybe I dreamed it, but I knew what I heard. After that, I stopped sleeping on top of the bed. I took an old sheet, tucked it over the side, and crawled underneath. I wrapped myself in a comforter like a cocoon, shoved headphones in, and turned my back to the door. I figured if something was going to be in the room with me, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know. The next morning, my grandma laughed when my grandpa told her. She said something like, "Oh, your cousin said the same thing last time she stayed. Footsteps or something. Like it was nothing. Like it was funny." I slept under the bed for the rest of that trip. I've been back to that house more times than I can count since then. I'm 23 now. I still stay in the same room. I still hear those footsteps every single time. They never miss a night. Always at least once. Sometimes twice. It's always the same pattern. Start at one end of the room upstairs. Walk over. Stop. Then, after a while, return. I don't know what it is. I've looked at the house. I've even gone as far as checking forums and asking if anyone else has had experiences like that. No one really takes it seriously. A few people mentioned that old houses shift or that rodents can make sounds that seem bigger in the quiet. I guess that would be easier to believe if the footsteps didn't follow the exact same route every time. If it didn't feel like someone was up there, walking right over me. I don't go upstairs anymore. I haven't in years. Not alone. Not even in daylight. There's something about that room. That long, narrow room with the closets and the window that never seems to move. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I believe in what I heard. And I know what I feel every time I look at that ceiling. Now, I sleep on top of the bed again. I guess I got tired of hiding under it like a kid, but I still keep my back to the door. I still wear headphones. Loud ones. The kind that drown everything out. I haven't heard anything come down the stairs since that first night. Not once. But I keep thinking about how it moved that time. How it came down step by step, slow, like it had nowhere to be. Like it was just checking. I don't want to hear it come down again. So I don't listen. And I don't look. I lived in a bizarre little house as a child. It was incredibly tall and thin, almost like a chimney someone had forgotten to stop building. From the outside, it looked like someone had taken a normal attached house and simply removed the houses on either side, leaving it standing awkward and alone. It had 3 full floors, a dark basement that always smelled like wet concrete and rust, and a cramped attic I had never entered until the last week we lived there. It was the kind of house that made people pause when they walked by, not because it was beautiful or grand, but because it looked like it didn't quite follow the rules. The front door opened straight into the staircase. That was the first strange thing. You didn't walk into a hallway or a living room, just straight into the stairs, as if the house wanted you to go up or down right away. The living room was on the 2nd floor, the kitchen on the 1st, and the bedrooms on the 3rd. The attic and basement were technically in use, but both were wired for electricity and had their own little quirks. The basement, for example, had a shower stall set up right in the middle of the floor, no walls or curtain around it. Just a shower head, a drain, and tiles slapped onto the otherwise bare concrete floor. It worked too, hot water and everything, but none of us ever used it. Our backyard was another joke. It was more like a patch of grass between the back door and the fence, not even 5 steps deep. You could touch the fence with one hand and the door with the other. We tried putting a garden gnome there once, but it felt like clutter, so we moved it to the front. The gnome didn't survive long out there. Someone kicked its head off one Halloween. And then there was the dumbwaiter. That thing was my favorite. It ran on an old rope and pulley system, creaked like it was alive, and ran from the kitchen to my bedroom. I used it to send up snacks, toys, whatever I could fit inside. Sometimes I'd lie in bed and pull it up and down just for the noise, a gentle rhythmic clunk of old wood and metal, like the house breathing through its throat. Despite all its oddities, I loved that weird little place. It felt like the kind of house that had secrets, but not dangerous ones. Just old, forgotten, eccentric things like a great-grandparent who muttered strange stories but always smelled of peppermint and soap. But eventually, the problems piled up. Cracks in the walls, leaks in the roof, windows that wouldn't shut or open, and heating bills that made my dad go pale. We tried fixing it, one issue at a time, but it was like bailing water from a sinking boat with a spoon. Eventually, my parents sat us down and said we were moving. I didn't take it well. I'd grown up there, my whole world squeezed into its skinny frame. It didn't matter that it creaked too much or the pipes groaned like sick animals at night. It was my home, but kids don't get much say in these things, so when the time came, I started packing. I had this closet in my room that I used more like a storage pit than anything else. I never organized it. I just shoved things in until I could barely close the door. Before the move, I pulled everything out layer by layer, trying to make sense of the mess. Clothes, toys, books, wrappers I didn't remember eating. Years of childhood stuff into a 4x4-foot cube. Once I got deep enough, I found something strange, a square cut into the ceiling of the closet. It was subtle, but it was definitely a hatch, with a little ring embedded in the wood for pulling it down. I had never noticed it before, which was strange considering how many hours I'd spent hiding in there during hide and seek, or just avoiding chores. I yanked on the ring, and the door came down easily. A rickety ladder followed. I remember the smell first. It wasn't a rot smell, not sharp or sour. More like dust and dry insulation, the kind of scent you only notice when it's suddenly very close. I stood on top of the pile of compacted clothes, solid enough to hold my weight, and pulled myself into the attic. I expected darkness, but the place was lit. Faintly but lit. Strings of old red Christmas lights were strung around the beams. They looked ancient, the kind with big bulbs and frayed cords, but they still were. Some of the bulbs flickered, others glowed steadily. It gave the whole attic a reddish hue, like an old darkroom. I could see well enough, but everything looked washed in blood. The attic was bigger than I expected. Not wide, but tall like the rest of the house and weirdly clean. The insulation had been wrapped in plastic sheets, nailed neatly to the walls, and the floor was covered with old rugs that didn't quite fit. In one corner was a gurney, an honest-to-God metal gurney, like from a hospital, with layers of blankets and sleeping bags piled on top of it. Near it sat a mint green refrigerator, rusted along the bottom, but humming quietly when I plugged it in. It didn't make sense. It looked like someone had lived there, not just camped out, but really lived there for a while. There were empty tin cans stacked in one corner, a bucket full of old water bottles, and even a hot plate covered in ash. And then, around the center of the attic, I saw the bones. There were a lot of bones. Some were long and curved like ribs, others short and thick like vertebrae. They were in piles, clumps, groups. One pile was small and neat, bones cleaned and stacked with care. Another was chaotic, just a mess of fragments and dust. Two of the piles were blackened, scorched at the edges, and the wooden floor beneath them was charred and bubbled. The walls behind those piles were stained with black smears, like soot or something darker. In several places, written with some burnt material, was the word sorry, scrawled over and over, in different handwriting, overlapping in places. I stood there for a long time, not touching anything, barely breathing. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't have a vocabulary, a framework. I was maybe 11 or 12, and all I knew was that this wasn't normal. This wasn't just weird. This was wrong. These bones, there were too many of them, too many different kinds. I saw bird bones, I think. Something like a dog's jaw. Something that looked disturbingly human, though I didn't want to believe that. It hit me then that I had slept beneath this place my entire life. The attic sat right over my room. All those nights I'd lain awake, listening to the wind whistle through the thin walls, thinking it was nothing. This was above me. Whoever had stayed here, whatever they had done, they had been only a few feet away. I backed out slowly, careful not to bump anything. I climbed down the ladder, shut the hatch, and pushed my clothes back into place. I didn't tell anyone. Not then. Not when we finished packing. Not when we left the house and someone else moved in. I was scared, but more than that, I was ashamed. Like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see, and now it was a part of me. Years passed. We moved across town to a normal house with normal rooms and a yard you could actually use. I kept thinking about that attic, though. Every time I heard something in the walls or attic of our new house, I'd freeze. It wasn't just fear. It was something else, something heavier. I started looking into the history of our old house when I was old enough to know how. I went to city records, checked old permits and complaints. The house was over 100 years old. It had changed hands more than a dozen times in 30 years. No major news articles, no obvious crimes. But there were patterns. People never stayed long. Some owners only kept a year or two before selling again. There were reports of strange smells, faulty wiring, issues with plumbing that never got resolved. The kind of things that make a place hard to live in, but not enough to raise alarms. Then I found something that stuck with me. In a police archive, buried in a scanned document from the 1970s, there was a report of a missing teenager last seen near that street. A girl. No body was ever found. No follow-up, just a name and a date. A few years later, another disappearance. This time an older man, homeless, possibly drunk, seen walking into the alley behind the house and never seen again. Nothing ever proved, but the coincidence gnawed at me. I finally went back, years later. I was in college by then, studying architecture of all things, and the house had stuck in my mind like a splinter. I told myself I want to study its strange layout, maybe even draw up some sketches for a class project. But really, I just wanted to see if the attic was still the same. The new owners weren't home. I waited until dusk, hopped the fence, and tried the basement door. It was locked. I circled around, found an unlocked window, and climbed through. The house had changed. New paint, new furniture, but the bones were the same. The structure, the shape. The narrow stairs, the dumbwaiter still in place. I went to the closet, opened it, and pushed everything aside. The hatch was still there. I pulled it down, climbed up, and entered the attic again. It was empty. No gurney, no fridge, no bones, but the floor still bore the black stains. The Christmas lights were gone, but faint outlines of where they had been still marked the beams. The wall still had those dark smears, cleaned, maybe, but not erased. Someone had tried to clear it out, but the place remembered. I left without touching anything. I never went back, but I think about it every night before I fall asleep. That attic above my childhood bed, the lives that had passed through there, the bones, the word sorry written in the dark. And I wonder, not who lived there. I don't care anymore. What I wonder is, how many more houses like that exist? I remember the weight of my skateboard hanging loose in my hand, the grit of asphalt beneath our wheels as we rolled out of the 7-Eleven, our stomachs full of cheap soda and taquitos. I was about 14, with Tim and Brandon by my side. Fellow skaters, best friends since we first learned to push off on cracked sidewalks. The sky was dull gray, the kind of afternoon that could swallow light. Nothing felt off as we stepped past the rows of gas pumps. Then I saw him, a man, middle-aged, maybe 45, wearing a grim expression as he leaned over a white pickup. The nozzle clicked shut, and almost at once his head pivoted, his gaze locking straight onto me. Our eyes met. I felt a jolt, like a warning bell, but the moment passed as he shoved the pump back, climbed into the truck, and slammed the door. Before I could register what was happening, the engine revved. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning hot on the concrete. My friends and I froze, hearts thumping, as the vehicle gunned straight toward us. Panic hit me like ice. My arm, my left arm, tingled from the graze of metal against skin. The truck's front bumper knocked the skateboard from my hand. It clattered away. Brandon yelled an expletive I'd never heard him use so loud, so terrified. The man barreled through the parking lot divider, tearing into the earth, and vanished behind the convenience store. We scrambled, not knowing our next move. My hand searched for the board that was no longer there. Panic pumped into my chest like electricity. We turned our heads and saw the truck, half hidden, creeping back out, cutting across uneven dirt. Tires flinging mud as it came at us again. We bolted, feet pounding the highway's shoulder, knuckles white on the cement barrier. I glanced back once, Brandon leading, Tim just behind him, me trailing by a few paces. The truck cut the distance fast, hotter than fury itself. Gravel sprayed as its tires skidded forward. We'd skated down this highway countless times, always laughing, always safe until now. Our sanctuary was the public library 2 blocks down. I saw its tall windows and empty front steps, and I sprinted toward it. Brandon and Tim were mere seconds ahead of me, already pushing at the locked glass. I swear I saw fear in their fast movements, their footsteps frantic all against the concrete plaza. My lungs burned. I was going to make it, and then I realized it was Sunday. The library doors were locked. Dead quiet inside. No help. No refuge. A cold realization. We couldn't go in. They couldn't go in. We needed another plan, and fast. I cut away, veering right, into the woods next to the building. I knew that trail. It led behind the library, meandering between tall pines, brushing past thick undergrowth until it emptied into the back end of my street. My backyard, really a small gate, climbed out once to feel an echo of freedom. I darted into the trees. I don't know how long I ran, branches slapping my face, heart pounding like a drum. My breath came ragged in my throat. I didn't stop, not even when the trail doubled back near the highway. I kept going, pushing through brambles, grass licking at my ankles. And then I heard it, like a freight train. Footsteps, not far behind. I swung my head left, just in time to catch sight of that white truck pulling in behind me, tires carving into the dirt parking lot beside the library. The man jumped out, larger than memory, and lumbered toward the woods. I can still picture it. The length of his stride, the heavy coat he was wearing, the long, rigid shape in his hand. Was it a shotgun? A crowbar? I'll never know. All I know is it looked too long for a pipe. Metal glinted at the very end. I scrambled deeper into the trees, pushing branches out of the way. Tried to stay quiet, trying to breathe slow without letting him hear me. Every crack of branch, every rustle of leaf sounded like his footsteps closing in. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed it. I stayed off the trail after that. I dodged behind thick trunks, crouched low near fallen logs, turned sideways to make my body small. Sunlight dimmed overhead. The only sounds were my strained breaths, birds chirping out of rhythm, distant highway droning. Behind me, heavy boots or truck step pounds echoed now and then. I froze, held still, waited. No glimmer of white, no sound. Then the quiet swallowed again. I measure my breathing. Step forward 3 feet. Crouched behind another huge stump. Listen, I don't know how long I stayed there. Might have been 10 minutes, might have been 30. My mind ran faster than my feet ever could. Could he see me? Was he still searching? Did I hear him talk to himself? My chest felt like it had burst through my ribs. Every thought shuddered my spine. Then I heard the highway again, louder this time. Closer. The man must have returned to his truck. Maybe he gave up. Maybe he left. I didn't wait to find out. I got up slowly, tested my legs, walked toward the fence that separated the trail from my backyard. My street lay beyond. A few houses down, a neighbor's light was on. Tim's dad, Mr. Harris, was standing by his car, flashlight in hand. Relief hit me so hard I stumbled forward. "Get in," he said, voice sharp, panicked. I heard Tim and Brandon's voices inside his car, murmuring. 3 cops were there, circling the video store next door. They'd gone there after the call. They said they saw him too, the man, the truck, but they'd lost track in the parking lot. They checked license plates. The video store's manager, Tim's mom, stood by the window, crying. My mom came rushing in a moment later, eyes red, voice cracked. "I thought you were gone," she said. All I could do was shake. I told them I was okay. I ended up safe. The cops questioned us, took notes. We sketched the man as best we could. Middle-aged, broad shoulders, rough coat, white pickup. They searched the area, posted alerts. Nothing came of it. No match in the DMV, no other victims, no trace of him or the truck. For years after, I saw white pickups on our street or pain-in-the-ass highways. Every time I gripped the wheel of my family's car, my palms would sweat. I'd replay the afternoon in my head. The graze across my arm, the gas pedal socked to the floor, the thing in his hand. Even at parties or sleepovers, I couldn't let it go. I'd wake in the dark hours, sky black like it was that afternoon under dead clouds, soaked in fear. But life kept moving. I learned to skate better, confidence built in muscle. I took driver's edition, got my license. I kept my eyes sharp at gas stations. If I saw a lone man filling a truck, I'd twist the safety lock click. I've told that story dozens of times since, to friends, family, counselors. Always in simple words, just the facts, what happened, how sick my heart felt, how the man vanished, how we ran, how I escaped. It's real. It haunts me. But I survived. I got home. I'm here now, years later, writing it down so the memory shrinks its hold. And maybe tomorrow, I can walk past the 7-Eleven, no longer freezing at the rows of gas pumps, no longer hearing tires on pavement. Maybe tomorrow I can feel I'm safe again, and that's good enough for me. I wasn't thinking about anything special that night. I was in a good mood, the kind of calm contentment that comes after an easy evening with a close friend. The kind of night that reminds you the world isn't always so bad. We had talked, laughed, even sat in silence without it feeling awkward. I remember looking at my reflection in a store window as I left the bar, thinking I looked peaceful, like someone who belonged in that moment. I chose my usual walking route home. I live in a big city, the kind that never really sleeps, but I always choose my way home carefully. I like walking. I like the quiet after the noise of the bar. I know the streets well. I pick routes that aren't too busy because I've seen what can happen when men drive by too slowly on loud, crowded streets. But I don't go down the deserted lanes either. I prefer the in-between streets, the kind where porch lights still glow and curtains twitch if someone shouts. That night, I chose a road that passes a police station. I felt safe knowing it was there. That was my mistake, though not in the way you'd think. I had music playing in my ears, not loud, just enough to fill the quiet. I remember the song because it cut off so suddenly when I ripped out the earbud. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I had only just turned onto the street. The station was just a few houses up. I remember counting the steps, distractedly, the way you do when you're walking somewhere you've walked 100 times. And then, like someone flipping a switch, the air changed. It wasn't even something I saw. It was a sensation, the hair on the back of my neck standing up, that cold tightening in your stomach that says something is wrong. I didn't know what yet, but I slowed a little, glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw him. He was just a shadow at first, right next to me, to my left. I hadn't heard him approach. His hand was suddenly on the small of my back, and then he reached under my coat. He groped me. I could still feel the cold shock that tore through me. My body locked up for a split second, but only a second. I screamed, loud. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't controlled. It was raw panic, a sound from somewhere deep and primal. I jumped sideways, straight up onto the nearest lawn. It was instinct. I needed space, distance, anything. He froze, startled, then started walking like nothing had happened, like I was the one out of place. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was already on my phone. My hand knew what to do before my mind caught up. I dialed 911 as I kept my eyes on him. I screamed after him, something like, "Don't touch me. I'm calling the police," but I barely remember the words. I remember how loud my breathing was. I remember how my fingers shook but still pressed the right buttons. I described everything to the dispatcher. His clothes, his skin, his hair, his height, the way he walked, which side of the street he was on. I crossed to the other side, keeping him in my line of sight, never turning my back to him. The police station was in view now, bright against the night. 5 officers stepped out just as I approached. I told them everything again, this time more clearly, more deliberately. The adrenaline was still surging, but I forced myself to be precise. I pointed down the street, told them where he went, what he looked like. 2 officers jumped into a cruiser and sped off. What I didn't know then was that a couple had been getting out of a cab just down the street. They'd seen it happen. They followed me to the station. They gave their statements too. That part's important, not because I needed to be believed, I believed myself, but because it made things happen faster. While I sat in a plain, cold room giving my statement, one of the officers returned. He said they found him. He was arrested. Just like that. Less than 15 minutes after it happened. The fear didn't leave, not then. But there was a shift. Relief, maybe. Or just a feeling that I'd done something right. I walked home. I could have taken a cab. The officers offered. But I needed to walk. I needed the air. When I got home, I fell apart. I cried so hard I thought I wouldn't be able to stop. I called my mom. I don't even remember what I said to her. She cried too. The next few days were strange. I went to work. I made tea. I answered texts. Everything was normal and not normal at the same time. The police called to follow up. They told me his conditions. He made bail, $10,000. Just like that. That part made me feel small again, like the system could tilt in any direction and I had no control. They gave me his name. I kept the document, but I never looked at it again. I don't care who he is. I care what he did. And I care that I acted quickly enough that he didn't get away with it. I still walk. I still listen to music. But I only put one earbud in now. I skin shadows. I trust the feeling when something feels off. Because the body knows. It always knows. It's not paranoia. It's survival. I don't want to paint this like it was some triumph. It wasn't. It was terrifying. It shook me. But I learned how strong instinct is. I learned how fast your mind can work when it needs to. I learned that we don't freeze because we're weak. We freeze because something inside us is taking in information, trying to choose the right moment. When people talk about fight or flight, they forget how fast that choice comes. They forget the third option, act. You act in the space between fear and reason. You act because there's no time not to. I acted. He was arrested. He was charged. And for at least one night, for one moment, the story didn't end in silence. I spoke up. I screamed. I fought back the only way I could. I'm still here, and that matters. About a month ago, I went over to my girlfriend's house. We had been together for just under a year, and I'd been to her place plenty of times before. I knew the layout by heart. Living room just past the entry, kitchen on the right, stairs leading up to her room, and a guest bathroom tucked behind the kitchen. It was familiar and warm. Her parents were usually out for the evening, and we had the place to ourselves for a few hours before I had to leave. That night, though, something felt different the moment I walked in. It wasn't the kind of thing I could explain right away. Just this weird tightness in my chest, like I'd walked into a room where something had just happened. It was subtle at first, not even something I mentioned. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just tired or stressed. But when we walked into the living room, it hit me harder. That room had changed. Not a big change, but enough. There was a new piece of furniture against the far wall, where an old, lighter-colored china cabinet used to be. This new one was darker, heavier. It stood about 6 feet tall, made from some deep reddish brown wood that looked like it hadn't been polished in a while. The top had a curve to it, almost like a crown. There were 2 narrow wooden doors on either side, and in the center were glass panels that gave you a clear view of what was inside. A collection of small porcelain teacups, most with faded floral prints, and several small baby dolls with eyes that didn't quite match. I didn't say anything right away. My girlfriend was already halfway to the kitchen, and I didn't want to sound weird. But the unease kept growing. I didn't want to sit down in that room. I didn't want to even be near that cabinet. It gave off something I couldn't put into words. It was like walking into a hospital room, except worse. Heavier. It almost made me feel sad. Not just nervous, but genuinely, deeply sad. I asked her about it. She said it used to belong to her grandmother, who had passed away a few months back. Apparently, her mom wanted to keep something of hers in the house. Her grandmother had been a hospital bed for a while before she died, and I never got the chance to meet her. Still, it felt weird, like I was intruding, like the room didn't want me there. She brushed it off, told me not to worry about it, said it was probably just in my head. Then she went to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the couch, trying to distract myself, but my eyes kept drifting back to that cabinet. I don't know why I stood up and walked over to it. Curiosity, maybe. Maybe I thought I needed to face it to get over the feeling. I walked slowly, like I was trying not to wake someone up. My hands were sweating. My heart was doing this thing where it would beat fast, stop, then beat hard again. Up close, it was even more intense. The wood smelled old. Not musty, but aged. Dry. The glass was clean, no fingerprints. Inside, the dolls stared ahead. Motionless, their dresses all trimmed with lace. Their glassy eyes had this dull shine, like they hadn't been moved in years. Behind the shelves was a mirror. It wasn't a new mirror. It had spots, like age had eaten parts of the silverback. I leaned a little closer to get a better look at one of the teacups, and then I saw it, in the reflection behind me. Just for a second, there was a figure. Not detailed, just a silhouette, human-shaped, standing where the couch was. I didn't turn around right away. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked. When I looked again, it was gone. I called out to my girlfriend, not loud, but sharp. Just her name. No answer. Then I heard it. A scream. Not a yell or a shriek. A real panic scream. High-pitched. Raw. I bolted toward the bathroom. The door was shut. I slammed my hand against it. Called her name again. Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I banged on it with my fist. Finally, it opened. She was on the floor, her back to the tub, arms wrapped around her knees, face pale, shaking. I didn't ask her anything right then. I just helped her up. She wouldn't look me in the eye. Her whole body was trembling. We didn't speak. We didn't grab our stuff. We just left. No shoes, no jackets. We ran outside, got in my car, and I drove. Didn't matter where. I didn't even look at the GPS. I just drove. Back roads. Highways. Through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. An hour passed, maybe more. Eventually, she calmed down enough to speak. She said she was brushing her hair, looking in the mirror when she saw someone walk behind her. She thought it was me, but when she turned around, no one was there. Then the lights flickered. Then she saw the figure in the mirror, just standing behind her. She screamed and shut her eyes. That's when I came. We sat in a parking lot of some gas station until we could breathe normally again. I got her a bottle of water. She didn't drink it. When we finally drove back to her house, her mom was outside, sitting on the front steps like she was waiting for us. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. She didn't ask where we had gone, just said she'd been seeing shadows in the hallway. Thought it was her eyes playing tricks. Then, she said she started feeling like someone was in the room with her. It kept getting worse until she just stepped outside. We didn't stay. I dropped my girlfriend at a friend's place that night. I went home, didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mirror, that silhouette. I've always been the kind of person who chases things like this. If someone told me their house was haunted, I'd be the first to ask for a tour. When people claim they heard things in the woods, I'd pack a bag and go. Never found anything. It was always just creaks and wind and the power of suggestion. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a creaky floorboard or a draft. This wasn't even fear. It was something colder, something emptier. A few days later, her mom had the cabinet moved to the garage. She didn't say why. We didn't bring it up. After that, things got quieter in the house. But that feeling hasn't left me. It's like it burned something into me. I walk past mirrors now and check them more carefully. I avoid looking directly at them when I'm alone, especially when the room is quiet. I don't believe in ghosts. Not really. But I do believe that some places, some things hold on to what they've seen. Maybe it's just memory. Maybe it's something we don't have a word for yet. Whatever it is, that cabinet had it. That mirror had it. Maybe still does. I haven't gone back to that house since. And I don't plan to. Last summer, I decided to go back to my parents' house during the holidays. It had been a while since I visited, and even though I liked having my own space in the city, something about being home felt easy and safe. My room was exactly the way I left it years ago. Posters still on the walls, the same old desk pushed against the window, and the bed that creaked the same way every time I moved too fast. My parents hadn't changed much. They were still the quiet type, early to bed, early to rise, and the house had this stillness to it, especially at night. It was around the middle of July, humid and still, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin even with the windows open. That night, I stayed up late in my room. I had the windows cracked to let some air in, though it didn't help much. My computer screen glowed in the dark, the only light in the room. I had headphones on, just mindlessly watching videos, scrolling through old photos, wasting time like I always did when I was back home. It must have been around 3 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the desk next to me. It was a call from my sister. That immediately felt strange. Her room was just down the hallway, maybe 10 or 12 steps from mine. If she needed anything, she could have easily just walked over. Still, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she didn't want to wake up our parents, or maybe she was just being lazy. I reached for my phone, but as soon as I picked it up, the call ended. No message, nothing. Just the call log showing her name and the timestamp, 3:07 a.m. I took off my headphones, stood up, and went down the hallway toward her room. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the fridge humming downstairs and every creak in the wooden floor. Her door was slightly open, like it usually was when she slept. I pushed it gently, and just as I was about to call out her name, she started screaming. It wasn't a startled yelp or a panic call. It was a full-on, blood-curdling scream that made me jump back for a split second. I didn't even think. I shoved the door open and ran in. Her room was dark, just the soft yellow glow from the streetlight outside slipping in through the curtains. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide, crying, holding her blanket up like it was some kind of shield. I flicked the light on. Nobody else was there. I looked around the room. Under the bed, behind the curtains, in the closet. Nothing. Just silence and my sister sobbing on the bed. After a few minutes, she calmed down enough to speak. though she didn't say much at first. I sat on the edge of the bed, still catching my breath. Finally, she told me what happened. She said she woke up out of nowhere and saw something. A dark figure, not even a full body, just this shape standing inches from her face. Not moving, not saying anything, just hovering there. She screamed instinctively, and when she did, it vanished. She didn't even remember reaching for her phone. In fact, she was sure she hadn't. Her phone wasn't even in the room, she said. I didn't believe her at first. Not that I thought she was lying, but I figured she was just confused. Nightmares can feel real. The mind plays tricks on you when you wake up in a half dream. That kind of thing. So I told her she had called me, showed her the log on my phone, but she just shook her head, still crying. We went downstairs to look. Her purse was hanging on the back of one of the kitchen chairs, and sure enough, her phone was in it. Batteries still charged, notifications untouched. I opened her call log. Nothing. No outgoing calls since the previous afternoon. I stood there for a while, just holding both phones in my hands, comparing them. Mine clearly showed a call from her number. 3:07 a.m. Hers didn't show anything. Not even a failed attempt. It didn't make any sense. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. I sat in the living room with her for a few hours, both of us wrapped in blankets, the hallway lights left on. She didn't say much after that. Eventually, the sky started to turn that pale gray blue that comes just before sunrise, and we finally started to relax a little. Our parents came downstairs around 6, surprised to see us awake. We didn't tell them everything, just said she had a nightmare, and I kept her company. They didn't ask much. Maybe they were still too groggy. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about it. I tried every way I could make sense of that call. Maybe some kind of phone glitch? Maybe someone spoofed her number? But who would do that? And why would it happen right at that moment when she claimed to see something? I checked online, looked up every forum and tech support thread I could find. Found a few stories of similar glitches, but they were always different in the details. Accidental FaceTime calls, people butt dialing from lock screens. Nothing matched what happened. I asked her again about it 2 days later. She was calmer by then, but still seemed shaken. She stuck to the same story. Said she remembered waking up and just feeling watched. Not hearing anything, just this pressure like someone was near. And then she opened her eyes, and there it was, a shape with no features, no color. Just a darker patch of dark. She swore she hadn't touched her phone. Said she was sure of it. When I told her again about the call log on my phone, she didn't even argue. Just looked at me and said, "I believe you." The weirdest part? That night stayed with me more than I expected. Not just because it scared us, but because of how unexplained it was. No answers, just an event that didn't make sense. And ever since then, I've noticed little things. Not every night, not even often. But sometimes when I'm alone, I get that same feeling she described, like someone's watching. Not close, just around. Like you walk into a room and feel like it's not really empty. And then there's the phone. My sister's phone has never done anything like that again. But mine? A few months later, I got another call. This time, from a number that didn't exist. Just zeros. It rang once. I picked it up out of reflex, but it was already gone. No call log. No history. Just the memory of the ringtone echoing in my room in the middle of the night. I try not to think about it too much now. I've told a few close friends. Most of them just nod politely. Chalk it up to stress or technical errors. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was just some weird, unrepeatable glitch. But that doesn't explain why she screamed before I even got to the room. It doesn't explain the shape she saw, the phone call that came from a phone in another room, untouched in a purse. It doesn't explain why my own phone seemed to remember something hers didn't. Sometimes things happen that don't fit into the way we expect the world to work. And they don't have to be ghosts or demons or anything out of horror movie. Sometimes it's just the facts that don't add up. No answers, no follow-up, just a moment that doesn't make sense. And that's what sticks with you the longest. I still have that call saved on my phone, even now. Just a single entry in my call history. Incoming, from her, 3:07 a.m. Every now and then I look at it and wonder what I would have heard if I had answered seconds sooner. I still remember the look on his face. My grandfather, lying there in that hospital bed, tubes in his arms, bruises from failed 4 attempts, his eyes half open but far away. He wasn't really there anymore, not the way I had known him. Not the man who fixed the old wood swing on the front porch every spring without being asked. Not the man who used to keep butterscotch candies in the glove box for us grandkids. Who carved our initials into a piece of oak and said it was our family tree. The last time I saw him lucid, he took my hand, squeezed it tightly, and told me plain and simple, "If I go, let me go. Don't keep me here for your sake." He had always been that way, direct, unflinching. I respected him for it. I loved him for it. That was who he was, even when the cancer had returned and his body was starting to fade faster than any of us wanted to admit. He didn't want to be kept alive by machines. He didn't want to be a shell of himself. But when the time came, everything changed. My grandmother, my mother, my aunt and uncle, they weren't ready. I guess no one ever is. But they acted like they forgot what he asked for. Maybe it was fear or guilt or desperation. Maybe it was just weakness. But when it got bad and he couldn't speak for himself, they had him intubated, sedated, hooked up to machines, kept alive because they weren't ready to lose him. And it broke something in me to watch it happen. They told me the doctor hadn't explained everything, that it happened fast, that decisions had to be made quickly. I knew they were lying. I'd seen the chart. I'd spoken to the nurses. I knew they had time. They had options. I wasn't in the room when the choice was made, but I know the difference between panic and denial. And I know when someone's running from the truth. This was only 4 months after my daughter died. I was still reeling from that. I hadn't even learned how to breathe properly again. She was born at 29 weeks. I still remember the feeling when the nurse told me she was coming early. It was like the world was slipping sideways and no one else noticed. Everyone was smiling and trying to stay calm, but I could feel something was wrong. Even after she was born, so small and fragile, I tried to stay hopeful. But deep down, I think I knew. I think I knew from the first moment I saw her in that incubator, the wires, the monitors, the way her chest moved so quickly like she was trying to catch up with time. We named her Eliza. She was a fighter, that little girl. For a few days, she made us believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. But then came a diagnosis, trisomy 18. I had never heard of it before. I sat in the consultation room, staring at the doctor while she explained what it meant. The words tumbled around my brain, but none of them stuck. I just heard not compatible with life, and my heart broke into pieces I didn't even know I had. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Watching her decline was like dying in slow motion. Every time I walked into the NICU, I felt like I was walking into a goodbye. She couldn't cry. She couldn't hold on. I sat by her side, humming songs she'd never know, whispering stories she'd never lived. Her skin was translucent, her hands the size of a postage stamp. I held her through the wires, afraid to move too much, terrified that I might hurt her by loving her too hard. When the doctors told me there was nothing more they could do, I felt hollow. I wanted to scream, but there was no sound left in me. They offered to let her pass in the incubator, comfortable, quiet. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't let my daughter die alone in a plastic box. So I held her. I held her in my arms, and I rocked her, even as the monitors fell silent. I felt her go. One moment there was life, and the next there wasn't. And I thought it would kill me, but I survived. I did it because I wanted to do right by her. I wanted to give her the only comfort I could. So when my family ignored my grandfather's wishes, it felt like betrayal. Not just of him, but of everything I had just gone through. I knew what it meant to love someone enough to let them go. I knew how much strength it took to stop clinging. And they couldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. Instead, they kept him in a limbo of pain and confusion. For weeks. He died 4 months to the day after Eliza. 4 months of hospital visits, silence, whispers in the hallway, pretending it was okay. It wasn't okay. I couldn't talk to my mother. I couldn't look at my grandmother without feeling rage. Every time I brought up his wishes, they brushed me off. It's complicated, they'd say. You don't understand. But I did. I understood more than they ever would. I understood what it meant to put someone else's peace ahead of your own heartbreak. I visited him alone most days. I'd sit by his bed, hold his hand. I talked sometimes, but mostly I just sat. The room always smelled like antiseptic and something older, a kind of stillness that soaked into everything. The machines beeped, and the tubes hissed, and I waited. I waited for them to find the courage I had found in that NICU. I thought about Eliza every time I looked at him. Two people I loved in beds they didn't choose. Two people whose bodies weren't strong enough to stay. But only one of them got the peace they deserved. The other was forced to linger because the people around him couldn't let go. The day he died, it was quiet. The machines had been removed only the night before. After weeks of pushing, pleading, arguing, my uncle finally relented. The doctor asked again what they wanted to do, and this time there was silence. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe they finally remembered what he'd asked for. They took out the tube. They turned off the meds. I sat with him through the night. I watched his chest rise and fall, slower each time. I watched him fade just like I watched her. There were no last words, no revelations. Just breath and then no breath. Just the space that gets left behind. When I got home that morning, I couldn't cry. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold. I sat on the floor of Eliza's room, surrounded by the things we never got to use. A blanket she never wore. A book I never read to her. I thought about my grandfather and how he used to say that time was the one thing you never get back. How he always made the most of every second he had. I don't know if he knew what was happening at the end. I don't know if he could feel the tubes, if he was aware of how much they prolonged everything. I hope not. I hope his mind was already gone, that he had drifted somewhere beyond it. But I'll never forgive them for what they did. And I don't think I need to. Some things don't get smoothed over with time. Some things stay jagged. But I also know this. I did what I had to do. For him and for her. I held her as she died. And I sat with him while he slipped away. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I let them go. Because that's what you do when you love someone more than you fear losing them. You let them go. In the months that followed, things shifted. I stopped trying to make my family understand. I stopped trying to fix what they broke. I let them have their memories, their excuses. I built my own peace, brick by brick. I started therapy. I planted a tree for Eliza in the backyard. I wrote letters to my grandfather and tucked them under the roots. Sometimes I sit out there and just listen to the wind in the branches. I think about how fast life moves, how it always ends, whether we're ready or not. And I think about what it means to truly love someone. Not to cling, not to control, but to witness. To be there, to say goodbye with your whole heart, even when it tears you in half. That's the part no one tells you about love. It's not just about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. And I did. I let them go. I still feel the weight of that afternoon pressing down on me, like a hand on my chest from the moment I left the dressing room until hours later when my hands finally stilled and my breath slowed. It was almost exactly 1 week after I'd earned my CPR certification. I thought then that getting certified meant I'd be ready for anything. But I wasn't ready for the sound of my own heart pounding as I sprinted across a cracked asphalt lot, or for the blur of panic that made every second stretch into an eternity. I'd gone to the thrift store with 2 friends, people I knew mostly through work, casual acquaintances who liked the scavenger hunt approach to Halloween costumes. The racks were overflowing with mismatched skirts and plaid jackets, plastic bats dangling from the ceiling, folding tables piled high with ancient VHS tapes. I was in a tiny curtained cubicle trying on an Edwardian dress, so ridiculously ill-fitting I couldn't stop laughing when they knocked on the door. Then everything inside went silent. I stepped out, still fumbling with the hem, and saw their faces shift from amused to alarmed. Someone blurted out about a person passed out in the parking lot. The words cut through the chatter like glass. I told them I was certified, that I'd check it out, and pointed at the phone on the counter. Someone called 911 right now. Their eyes widened. Then they scrambled. I heard dialing, and then I was moving, shoes slipping on the concrete as I searched for whoever had gone down. I hesitated at first, scanning the nearest row of cars. No one was lying there. Then a woman stumbled out the front doors, wide eyes, voice shaking, telling me the car was parked by itself, far in the back, away from the other vehicles. I sprinted toward it, adrenaline roiling, breath jagged in my throat. I found her slumped against the driver's side window, body half in and half out of the car like a rag doll tossed aside. Her hair clung in matted strands to her face, dark stains spreading on the upholstery beneath her. Her skin was the color of bruised fruit, purple turning to blue where the cold metal pressed against her cheek. I saw the shadow of red-rimmed eyes, but even those were blue now. A fine line of blood ran from the corner of her mouth, dried into a thin crust. I froze for a heartbeat, then broke inside, knuckles white on the car door handle. I yanked it open. Inside, the smell of something acrid, burnt plastic, chemical tang, hit me. My throat tightened. I reached in, rolled her head gently to the side. I needed a pulse, carotid, neck, right there under my fingers. When I felt nothing but cold flesh, I shook her lightly, called her name even though I didn't know it. No response, only faint, ragged, wheezing breaths that might have been my own heart in my ears. I tugged her out and laid her on the pavement, back to the asphalt, arms limp at her sides. My hands shook violently as I pressed 2 fingers to her neck again. Still nothing, but I had to act. I pressed the heel of my hand down on her sternum hard. I counted under my breath, 1, 2, 3 then let the chest rise, let it fall. My mind locked on the rhythm. 30 compressions, then 2 breaths. I pressed down again, bone deep, pushing air into her lungs, even though they didn't seem to want it. The road scraped her cheek. Grit bit into my palms through my gloves. Somehow, someone had arrived. I heard footsteps, a radio crackle, a second voice calling for more help. Paramedics in uniform, bright stripes on dark blue. They moved beside me seamlessly, slipping gloves on, as though we'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. They checked the rhythm I'd set, took over compressions without a word. Their faces were calm, but grave. One knelt behind me and placed a bag valve mask over her face, squeezing in breaths. I sank to my knees. I felt useless standing there, watching, wanting to do more. They worked as a unit. One attached pads to her chest. A small machine was set to deliver a shock if her heart could be jolted back. But when they asked her to stand clear before the shock, her skin barely rippled. There was no reset. They injected naloxone. Narcan, they called it, something to reverse an opioid overdose if you got in time. The needle glinted in the harsh daylight, and I saw them tilt her arm, slip it into a vein. They checked her pupils, spoke in low tones I couldn't catch. The EMT who'd driven the ambulance yelled to call for a second crew. Within seconds, another ambulance skidded in. More uniforms, more hands. I counted 6 EMTs circling her body, each moving with precise purpose. They rolled her onto a board, strapped her down, covered her with a thin blanket stained by dust and spilled fluids. The sirens cut through the quiet, then faded as they peeled out, lights still flashing. I stayed on my knees in the asphalt, eyes fixed on the place where her head had lain. My gloves were slick with something I didn't want to identify. My own heart pounded so fiercely I could hear it in my ears. I remember walking back inside, drawing in ragged breaths, feeling every eye on me as I crossed the threshold. No one said anything, but I saw it in their faces, the shock, the relief that I'd been there, the guilt that they had. I peeled off my gloves in the dressing room and stared at my shaking hands as they twisted the latex bits. I thought about the pills and needles littering her floor, the tiny plastic toys, and a car seat and back seat. A child's name tattooed on her arm, another name below it. I wondered who they were, if they were her children, her siblings, her own self before everything spiraled out of control. That night, I sat on my bed at home, staring at the pharmacy-issued booklet on CPR I'd carried in my pocket earlier. I thumbed through the pages, pressure points, airway, defibrillation, all the steps, all the certainties. And I thought, what use is knowing the steps when someone's already that far gone? I pressed my palms to my face and tried to stop seeing her, half slumped, fist clenched around a syringe, tears dried on her cheeks. I tried to imagine her alive and breathing and waking up in a hospital bed, but I couldn't hold that image. Every time, I saw the blue-purple stain of death creeping across her skin, the stillness heavy in the air. Sleep didn't come. When it did, it was broken by nightmares of that afternoon. The asphalt turned to something soft and spongy beneath my knees like I was kneeling in mud. She would open her eyes in the dream and look right at me, pleading, but her lips wouldn't move. I tried to breathe for her, to squeeze the bag valve mask. but no air came. I woke up gasping, fists tied around the sheets. In the days after, I drove past that thrift store on my way to work. I slowed down, peered into the lot, half expecting to see her car parked alone again. I pulled away before the light turned against me. I told myself I'd done all I could, that she'd slipped away moments before I reached her, that sometimes medicine doesn't win. But I kept thinking about the children, the toys, the car seat, and I couldn't stop. I started carrying extra Narcan in my bag, even though I wasn't qualified to administer it beyond what I'd learned in class. I kept scissors and gloves and a compact CPR mask in a little pouch, like armor against the next time, because I knew there would be a next time. I had seen how fast life could slip from someone's hands, how close we all walk to that edge without knowing it. And so I practiced compressions on my living room couch at home, listening to the thump, thump, thump echo in the quiet of my apartment. I close my eyes and count, imagining a body beneath my hands, warm, soft, fighting. And I tell myself I will reach that person in time. I will squeeze that air back into their lungs. I will not arrive a second too late, because I can't bear to see that blue-purple face again, those tears frozen on her skin, her body lost to the silence before I could even say her name. When we first moved into the house I grew up in, I was around 6 years old. It was a small, single-story home at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. My parents had just bought it after years of living in cramped apartments. I remember my dad being excited about the backyard and my mom loving the big kitchen window that overlooked the garden. For me, it was the biggest place I'd ever lived in, and I got my own room for the first time. That was a big deal. The first few weeks were normal. I spent most of my time in my room, sitting on the carpet and building random things with my Legos. My room was at the end of the hallway, across from the bathroom, and down the hall from my parents' bedroom. Everything was quiet and normal. I was getting used to the new sounds of the house. The way the floor creaked when you walked too fast, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind pushing against the side of the house at night. Then, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, I heard it for the first time. I was playing with a little spaceship I had built out of Legos when I heard my dad call my name. Just a simple, calm, "Hey, come here." It sounded like it came from the direction of my parents' room. I got up, thinking maybe he wanted me to bring him something, or maybe he wanted to show me something. I walked down the hall and found him lying on the bed, reading a newspaper while my mom was folding laundry on the other side of the room. I stood there, kind of waiting. He looked up at me and asked, "What's up?" I said, "Didn't you just call me?" And he shook his head. "No." My mom looked confused too. "We didn't say anything," she said. I just stood there for a second, kind of awkward. Then I shrugged it off and went back to my room. It didn't feel like much at the time. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I misheard something. I was a kid. These things happen. But then it happened again. And again. Not every day. Maybe every second or third day. I'd be alone in my room or in the living room watching cartoons, and I'd hear my name called. Always just once. Always calm. Sometimes it sounded like my dad, sometimes like my mom. Once or twice, didn't really sound like either of them. But it was never urgent or scary. It was just like a regular call. "Hey, come here," or just my name. And every time I'd go check, they'd both look at me like I was imagining things. Eventually, I stopped mentioning it. I just figured they were playing some long joke on me, though I couldn't imagine why. I told myself it didn't matter. It wasn't hurting me, and maybe it was just the house creaking or something that sounded like my name. I tried to forget about it, but you can only ignore something for so long. One night, I was in my room building something with my Legos like usual. My parents were in their room watching a movie. I had just finished building a little car when I heard my dad's voice call out to me from his room. I stood up, stretched, and walked down the hallway. As I stepped into the doorway of their room, I saw both of them sitting there on the bed. They looked up at me, surprised. But before I could even open my mouth to ask what they wanted, I heard my mom's voice. It came from the living room, clear as day, like she was standing in there. She said my name in the exact way she would if I'd left a toy on the floor or something. But she was right in front of me, sitting next to my dad. I saw her eyes. She heard it too. My dad did too. They both froze. That was the first time I saw the look on their faces. Not amused, not confused, just quiet and wide-eyed. My mom got up and walked out into the hallway, then into the living room. She looked around. Nothing. The TV was off. Lights were off. No one was there. After that night, I didn't hear anything for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months. It was almost like whatever it was knew it had been caught. Things felt normal again for a while. I started school, made some new friends, had normal kid problems. Then late one night, I woke up to what sounded like my mom humming in the kitchen. It was faint, just soft enough to hear. I looked at the clock. It was around 2:30 a.m. I stayed in bed and didn't move. It didn't scare me, exactly, but I knew something was off. My mom never stayed up that late. I waited for a few minutes, listening. Then it stopped. The next morning, I asked if she had been up late. She shook her head. I was out cold, she said. My dad confirmed it. Neither of them had gotten up at all. That happened a few more times over the years. Little things. Sounds. A voice now and then. Always just out of sight. Always just when you started to forget. As I got older, I stopped reacting to it. It wasn't like it followed me anywhere. It was just something tied to the house. I didn't mention it to my parents anymore, and they never brought it up either. It was like an unspoken agreement. If we didn't talk about it, maybe it didn't exist. Then, when I was 17, my younger brother was diagnosed with partial narcolepsy. One of the symptoms, apparently, was auditory hallucinations, especially at the edge of sleep. That hit me hard. I thought maybe that's what had been going on with me. Maybe I had some mild form of it. Maybe I'd been hallucinating all those years and didn't know it. I scheduled an appointment, got tested, went through a bunch of questions, scans, sleep studies. Nothing. Clean bill of health. No signs of narcolepsy. No signs of any neurological issues. According to them, I was completely normal, so I was left with no answers. Still am. Now I live in another city. I moved out when I was 20, and I've only gone back to visit a few times a year. Every time I stay over at the house, I make sure to bring earplugs. Not because I'm afraid, but because I still hear it. Not every time, but often enough. I'll be lying on the couch in the guest room. Lights out, the house quiet, and then I'll hear it. A voice from the hallway, or from the kitchen, just calling my name. And now, I don't even bother getting up. I don't respond. I just lie there and wait for it to stop. Because it always does. That's the part I've come to understand. It never gets worse. It never tries to hurt me. It never tries to do anything other than call out. Like it's checking if I'm still here. I've told a few friends about it. Most laugh, some get freaked out. But I've stopped trying to explain it. There's no point. It's one of those things that lives in that strange, silent space between being awake and asleep, between imagination and reality. It's just part of that house, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I've delivered a lot of heavy things in my life. Hot tubs, furniture, appliances, you name it. I've been doing it for over 15 years, so there isn't much that surprises me anymore. But there was this one time down near Branson, Missouri, in a fancy, gated community up in the hills. That day still sticks with me. Not just because it was the closest I ever came to dying on the job, but because everything about that job felt off. Not paranormal, not ghostly or haunted or anything like that, just wrong. Like the kind of wrong you only notice when it's too late to back out. It was a big job. I was delivering a hot tub to a contractor who also happened to be the realtor for the house. It was one of those modern, high-end homes that developers build in ritzy vacation neighborhoods. The kind of place where people don't live full-time. Huge glass windows, metal railings, fake wood finishes. It looked like it came out of a magazine. Thing is, the house wasn't even done yet. It was still under construction. Scaffolding up on the sides. Extension cords snaked everywhere. Power tools screeching through 2x4s. Half the walls still open to the elements. The directions said to deliver the tub to the 4th floor balcony. At first that threw me, but then I saw the layout and it made more sense. The house was built on a steep hillside, so the driveway was at the top of the hill, level with the 4th floor of the house. From the road, it looked like a single-story home, but as the land dropped away, you could see the 3 other floors stacked beneath it, carved into the slope. So even though it was technically the 4th floor, it was the entrance floor from the road's perspective. The deck I needed to get the hot tub onto sat out the back of that level, facing out over the trees and down the hill. It was a long drop. I pulled up in the delivery truck, and there were about half a dozen construction workers already there. They were in charge of the build, not just employees, but a mix of guys, some young, some middle-aged. One guy looked like he'd been smoking drywall dust since the 90s. None of them seemed particularly thrilled to see me. but they were helpful enough. A couple of them pointed out where the hot tub was supposed to go, and then we all stood around for a second, looking at the logistics of how the hell I was supposed to get a 900-pound tub to a back deck on an unfinished home. The plan was to take the hot tub off the truck and move it on its edge using a dolly. That part was normal. I do that all the time. It's how these tubs are transported, upright, strapped securely, then rolled where they need to go. What wasn't normal was the path I had to take. From the driveway, I had to wheel the tub around the house, down a sloped bit of yard that was more loose gravel and mud than grass. We built a makeshift ramp with plywood and scrap lumber from the job site to get it from the yard up to the side porch. From there, it had to go through a side door, across the unfinished living room, through a set of sliding glass patio doors, and out onto the deck. Only the deck was barely there. They had built just enough decking to serve as a narrow bridge, maybe 3 feet wide, from the patio doors to the far back corner of the deck. That corner was where the hot tub was supposed to go, eventually secured and sealed in by finished decking and rails. But at the time, it was just this skinny path of wood planks with no railing, no safety lines, nothing but 4 stories of empty space behind it. I asked them twice if they were sure this was the way they wanted to do it. They just shrugged and said, yeah, the contractor wanted it there now, so it could be hooked up and inspected. No waiting for safety rails, no waiting for a finished deck. Just me, this giant tub, and a death plank to the edge of cliff. I didn't like it. Every nerve in my body told me to walk away. But that's the thing about this job. Walking away isn't always an option. You lose contracts. Word gets around. You become the guy who can't get the job done. So I pushed those thoughts aside and got to work. It took all of us, me and about 5 of the workers, to get the tub through the house and out onto the deck. The dolly wheels creaked and groaned as we went, the frame of it bowing under the weight. It's not just the weight, it's how the weight moves. These tubs are huge and awkward, even when upright. Every bump in the floor makes the whole thing sway. When we finally got to the sliding glass doors, I paused. I looked out at the decking. It looked like a pier over the ocean, except instead of water, there was open air and sharp rocks far below. The decking wasn't more than 3 feet wide, and even that was generous. There was nothing to either side, and the drop was a long way down. I swallowed, felt my palms start to sweat, and looked at the corner where the hot tub was supposed to go. It was a little platform. Again, just enough decking installed to hold the tub. Not to work around it, not to install it, just to place it. I nodded and we rolled the tub out. Crossing that narrow decking with the tub was probably the most focused I've ever been in my life. Every footstep was deliberate, every motion calculated. My body was tight, heart racing, jaw clenched. The wood beneath us bowed and creaked. I try not to think about the fact that we were walking a dolly with 900 pounds of dead weight across a few planks of lumber 4 stories in the air. One bad step, one loose board, one gust of wind. That was all it would take. When we got the tub into position, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like 10 minutes. We stood it upright in the corner, right where it was supposed to go. Now, came the tricky part, getting the dolly out from underneath it without setting the tub down. Normally, I'd lower it carefully, using the strap as a pivot, and tilt it slowly into place. But the contractor wanted it to remain upright for now, so it could be plumbed and wired easier. That meant a different method. To get the dolly out, we had to tilt the tub slightly, just enough to slide a couple of wood blocks under one side. Then we'd pop the strap loose, freeing the dolly. After that, we'd reverse the tilt, take the blocks out, and leave the tub standing upright. But here's where everything went sideways. To get enough leverage to tilt the tub, I had to plant my feet about 4 inches from the edge of the deck. That's not an estimate, I looked. 4 inches of weather plank between my heels and a 4-story fall. There wasn't room for error. I warned everyone to freeze. I didn't want any surprises. I needed to shift my feet just a little more to counterbalance the tub's weight. I inched backward. Now my heels were off the edge, just hanging there in the air. I could feel the emptiness behind me, could almost see it without turning my head. I had 1 construction worker on each side of me, both steadying the tub, and 3 more crouched near the base, trying to wrestle the dolly loose. 1 more guy stood off to the side, fiddling with the strap that would eventually secure the tub to the house. He wasn't helping with the lift, just passing time, really. At the time, I thought he was kind of useless. We were almost there. One side of the dolly was free. The second side just needed a little more pressure. But then, one of the workers, impatient, maybe eager to finish, decided to kick the corner of the tub. Not a big kick, just a shove with his boot to loosen the dolly. It worked, and in that same instant, I felt myself go. The tub shifted. My balance went with it. My feet slipped. There was no railing, no edge to catch. I was falling backwards into the empty air. I remember the moment so clearly. My arms flailed, reaching for something, anything. My whole body arched backwards as my weight carried me past the edge. I could see the tops of the trees down below, the jagged boulders. Time slowed. There was no way I was coming out of this. I wasn't even thinking anymore, just reacting. Then, just as fast as I'd gone backward, I was slammed forward. Something caught me. I hit the tub hard, chest first, and clung to it with both arms. I didn't understand what had happened. My whole body was shaking. One of the guys shouted, and the other scrambled to steady the tub. They got the dolly out while I hugged that thing like a lifeline. I didn't move. I couldn't. My knees felt like jelly. Eventually, I turned my head. Behind me, stretching across the deck like a lifeline, was the strap. That same guy, the one I thought was useless, had looped it around a post of the house and clipped the other into the tub. But before he did that, he had been pulling the slack through, coiling it behind me. When I fell, he'd instinctively yanked the strap tight. It wrapped behind my lower back, catching me mid-fall and redirected my momentum forward. He hadn't meant to save me, but he did. If he hadn't been playing with that strap, if he hadn't had it anchored and in his hands, I'd have been gone. Just another workplace accident, dead at the bottom of a ravine. I didn't say much the rest of that day. I helped them finish securing the tub, got back in my truck, drove off. But I couldn't stop thinking about that moment when I was weightless and then suddenly not. The feeling of my heels slipping, the breeze behind me, the sound of the wind in my ears. That guy, the one who saved me, I got his name. Found out he had a wife and a little boy. I had been planning a surprise trip to Breckenridge for Christmas for my wife and daughter. It was a whole thing. Rented a cabin, bought lift passes, the works. But after what happened that day, I knew what I had to do. I gave it to him, sent him and his family instead. Paid for the cabin, the lift passes, all of it. Told him it was a thank you. But truthfully, it still didn't feel like enough. My wife and daughter never knew. I just told them it fell through. We made other plans. Stayed home. When I was in high school, I had a close friend named Evan. We'd grown up in the same neighborhood, just 3 houses apart. The kind of friendship we had wasn't flashy, but it was dependable. We walked to school together, played video games after class, and shared late-night snacks in each other's kitchens. What made our friendship different was that it never really required plans or schedules. If one of us was bored, we'd just show up and the other would open the door. Evan lived next door to a house that had a weird kind of energy. I know how that sounds, but even before the story I'm about to tell you, I always noticed something off about it. It was a modest craftsman-style house, probably built in the 1950s like most of the neighborhood. It had a steep roof line, peeling white paint, and ivy growing up the sides. But it wasn't its appearance that made people whisper. It was the way it always seemed transient. There was always a for sale or for rent sign in front of it. People moved in and out in a matter of months. Sometimes they wouldn't even stay that long. I remember one time when a family moved in with a kid our age. We saw the kid playing in the backyard one afternoon and thought we might finally have a new friend in the neighborhood. But by the next weekend, the house was empty again. No moving truck. No goodbye. Just gone. I never gave it too much thought, honestly. It was one of those things we joked about. House must be haunted, or maybe it's on top of some portal to hell. But nobody ever really dug into it. It was just part of the background. One night, Evan and I were hanging out in his room. It was a cold December night, the kind where the wind bites your skin if you're out too long. We'd already gone through the usual routine. Movies, chips, and random conversations about nothing. We were bored. The kind of teenage boredom that feels like a physical weight. The kind that pushes you to do something stupid just to feel something. We were looking out his window, and the house next door caught our eyes. The porch light was off, as usual. The curtains were open, which was weird. I could see into the front room a bit, but there wasn't any furniture. Evan turned to me and said, No one's lived there for months. Then he got that look on his face, the one that meant he had a dumb idea. We should go check it out. I hesitated. I wasn't scared, not really, but it felt like a bad idea. Still, when you're 16 and your best friend challenges you, you go. I told myself we'd just peek through the windows, maybe take a couple of dumb pictures with the flash on, then leave. We put on our hoodies, grabbed flashlights from the garage, and snuck out the back door. The wind was worse outside, slicing through the gaps in my sleeves. The grass was dry and crunched under our feet. When we got to the fence between Evan's backyard and the house next door, he pointed to the side gate. "Let's go around back," he said. "I've seen a dog door. Might be open." The backyard was darker than the front. The house blocked out most of the light from the street, and the moon wasn't doing much. We crept past overgrown bushes and a rusted-out grill. The back door had a dog door at the bottom, like he said. I thought there was no way anyone could crawl through it, but Evan dropped to his knees and pushed himself halfway through. "I can fit," he whispered, his voice muffled. Then he was gone. A few seconds later, I heard a click and the back door creaked open. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from the outside air, but the kind that settles in your bones. The kind that feels wrong. I zip my hoodie all the way up and try to brush it off. It was probably just the house being unheated for so long. The inside was bare. The floors were old hardwood, scuffed and dusty. The walls were off-white, stained yellow at the edges like they'd soaked up years of cigarette smoke. The living room had a weird echo, like sound didn't know where to settle. There were no pictures, no furniture, no smell of any kind, good or bad. Evan pointed toward the kitchen. "Let's hang out in there for a bit." "Why?" I asked, but he was already walking. The kitchen was surprisingly clean. The counters were this faded turquoise color, and the sink was shallow and square. What stood out most was the breakfast nook. It had a built-in bench under a big picture window that looked out to the side yard. The street light cast a soft glow through the glass, enough to see by. The electricity was definitely off. No hum, no buzz, no fridge running. It was silent. We didn't sit on the bench. For some reason, we sat on the floor, backs against the wall, legs stretched out toward the middle of the room. We just talked. Dumb stuff. Music, school, what we'd do if we ever had enough money to get out of our town. Then, in the middle of Evan laughing at something I'd said, he suddenly screamed. I didn't understand what was happening. The scream was sharp, terrified. I turned to look at him, but before I could make out his face, everything went black. Not pitch dark, not like the lights went out. My vision went black. I couldn't see anything, and immediately after, this horrible cold washed over me. It wasn't just cold, it was sick, like every nerve in my body recoiled. I felt like I was under freezing water, only dry. My arms and legs felt heavy, my chest tight. I tried to move, but I couldn't tell which direction was which. I remember reaching out, swinging my hands in front of me, hoping to make contact with something, anything. I wasn't just blind. I was disoriented, lost. Then I felt a hand grab mine. Hard. It yanked me, pulled me with a strength that wasn't gentle. I stumbled, but I followed. I didn't care where it was taking me. Anything was better than that nothingness. Little by little, my vision came back. It started as static, like what you see when you close your eyes too hard. Then shapes, then light. I realized we were outside, standing under the streetlight. The cold disappeared almost instantly. I remember gasping for air, even though I wasn't out of breath. My limbs were shaking, but not from effort, just pure adrenaline. Evan let go of my hand. He looked pale. His eyes were wide, and he didn't say anything for a long time. We stood there just breathing until I finally asked what had happened. He didn't answer at first. He just looked at the house, then back at me. "When you're talking," he said finally. Something crawled out from under the table. It was black, like completely black. No face, no features. It looked kind of like a girl, but not really. It didn't move like a person. It got on top of you. You were still talking, but your eyes were wide open like you couldn't see me. Then you started flailing. I didn't know what else to do, so I pulled you out. We didn't go back. Not that night. Not ever. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like a layer of something heavy was always just behind me. My skin felt tight, like I was constantly bracing for a hit. I kept checking corners. Every time I walked past that house, I felt like something was watching me. The worst part was the night after. I had this dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I woke up in bed and couldn't move. The room was completely dark, and that same sick coldness started crawling over me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even blink. It only lasted a few seconds, but when it ended, I sat up gasping. My sheets were damp with sweat. My hands were clenched into fists. I stopped walking past Evan's house for a while. Took the long way to school. I never told my parents. What could I even say? The house was sold again 6 weeks later. A couple moved in, stayed for 3 months. Then they were gone. No warning. That house is still there, still changing hands every few months. I don't live in that town anymore, but when I visit, I make sure to avoid that street entirely. Evan and I still talk, and once in a while, one of us will bring it up. We always remember it the same way, always in the same order. Nothing changes. To this day, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in curses or haunted houses or demons or any of that. But I do believe that there are places where something is wrong. Not supernatural, just off. Places where the air is heavy and things don't behave the way they should. Places where people don't stay long. That house was one of them. And whatever happened to me that night, whatever that thing was, I hope to God I never feel it again. It happened when I was about 10 years old, during one of those long summer weekends where all the cousins and siblings got together at our grandparents' house. There were 10 of us kids in total, ages ranging from around 6 to 16. It was one of those loud, chaotic nights where the adults all went out for dinner, leaving us kids alone at the house. That wasn't unusual. They trusted the older cousins to keep an eye on the younger ones, and for the most part, we were all well behaved. That night, we were all crammed into the living room. Blankets were spread out on the carpet, pillows tossed around, snacks half eaten on the coffee table. The TV was playing some movie none of us were really paying attention to. The younger ones were dozing off or playing with toys while the older ones were talking about school, friends, and other teenage stuff. I remember sitting cross-legged by the couch, holding a bowl of popcorn, trying to listen to the older kids and feel like one of them. The house itself was quiet, aside from our noise. It was in a quiet neighborhood, a little on the older side, but well kept. The backyard opened into a thick line of trees, not a forest, but enough to give a good stretch of privacy. There weren't many streetlights in that area, so at night it got dark, really dark. The kind where your eyes take forever to adjust, and even then, the shadows seem to shift when you're not looking. It was probably around 9:30 or 10 p.m. when it happened. Out of nowhere, the entire house shook. I don't mean a little rattle like when a truck drives by. I mean the walls trembled, the floor beneath us vibrated, and the windows made this deep, groaning sound like they were going to crack. And then, at the exact same moment, there was this blinding flash of light from the backyard. Bright white, not like lightning. There was no thunder, no storm. Just a massive, quick flash that lit up the entire living room through the back windows. It was like the sun had exploded for a second right outside the house. Every single one of us froze. Then we all reacted at the same time. We dropped what we were doing and bolted into the hallway, yelling and bumping into each other. It felt like something terrible had just happened. Some of the younger kids were crying, and the older ones were panicking, trying to get everyone quiet and safe. We didn't know what was going on. It could have been anything. En explosion, a transformer blowing up, a crash, a bomb. That's how it felt, like a bomb had gone off just outside. The hallway felt safer somehow, even though it made no sense. It was narrow, no windows, and we could all bunch together and wait. One of the oldest cousins, Sam, pulled out his phone and started dialing. Another cousin said we should call the police, but they argued about it. Eventually, they decided to call the parents instead. They explained what happened in hushed, rushed voices. I remember watching their faces as they talked on the phone, confused then frustrated. They kept saying things like, "No, it really happened, and I'm not joking." It took us a while to build up the courage to come back out. We stayed in that hallway for maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. Time felt weird. I couldn't stop shaking. My hands were cold. And I remember holding onto my little sister, who was crying softly against my chest. None of us said much at that point. We just stared at each other, waiting for something else to happen. When we finally moved back into the living room, we did it slowly. The oldest cousins were in front, holding makeshift weapons, a broom, a fireplace poker, even a baseball bat someone found in the closet. We followed behind, tightly packed. The house was completely still again. Nothing was broken. No smoke, no smell, no strange noise. But the back windows still looked out onto that pitch-black yard. We didn't dare open the door. We just stood there, staring out. After a while, nothing happened. The shaking didn't come back. The light didn't return. Slowly, our nerves started to settle, though none of us were relaxed. We stayed together in the living room with the lights on and the weapons close by. The TV was off, and no one really wanted to put a movie back on. It felt wrong, like pretending nothing had happened. We just sat and waited for the parents to come home. When they finally arrived, they were surprised to find us all awake and huddled together in the lit-up room, looking terrified. We told them everything. The flash, the shaking, how the house felt like it was hit by something. They walked through the backyard with flashlights, checked the perimeter, looked at the trees, the fence, the ground. Nothing. Not even a burn mark, not a branch out of place. It was like it had never happened. We insisted it was real. All 10 of us had seen it. All 10 of us had felt it. We described it the same way, over and over. But the adults looked at each other with that expression that says they don't believe you. Or worse, they think you imagined it. They said maybe it was a transformer somewhere nearby that made the house vibrate and cast a weird light. Maybe we were just worked up watching a scary movie. But we weren't. We hadn't even gotten to the scary part of the film. And the light was too close. Too bright. And the house didn't just rattle. It shook. We weren't exaggerating. The next morning, the adults asked a few neighbors. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. No one felt a thing. That was the part that stuck with me. 10 kids in one house saw the same thing, but no one else noticed it at all. We even checked the local news. No reports of any transformer explosions. No car crashes. No weird weather events. Nothing. For the next few days, that backyard became a point of obsession for some of us. We went out there during the day, searching for any sign of what we saw. We walked the whole yard, through the line of trees, even into the woods a bit. Nothing. No footprints. No scorch marks. No desterro de grass. No smells. It was just like it always had been. I thought maybe it was some kind of weird power surge, but it wouldn't explain the shaking. I thought maybe a low-flying aircraft, but there was no sound. Just that flash and rumble. Some of my cousins started throwing out other ideas. Earthquake, underground blast, even military tests. But there were no explanations. Just theories. And after a while, the adults stopped bringing it up. They thought we were making too much of it, or that it was just one of those kid memories that get exaggerated over time. But for us, it stuck. Every time we got together, someone would bring it up. Remember the flash? What was that? Even 10 years later, we still talk about it. It never stopped feeling real. I still remember that feeling in my chest, like the air had been knocked out of me. That moment of pure silence after the flash, before the panic kicked in. It wasn't just fear, it was confusion. Like reality had taken a step sideways, and then pretended nothing happened. I've never felt that kind of sensation again, not even during real storms or blackouts. I've tried to make sense of it. I've read about sonic booms, underground tremors, even freak electrical discharges. Some rare phenomena can cause light flashes, apparently. There are stories online of ball lightning, which is some rare kind of electrical phenomenon, but even that usually comes with storms. We had no clouds. The sky had been clear. No wind. No humidity. It had been a calm, quiet night. To this day, I can't explain it. None of us can. And I think that's what makes it stick with me. If something terrifying happens, and then you understand it, you can start to move past it. But when something unexplainable happens, something that no one else believes, it lingers. It becomes part of how you see the world. A reminder that not everything that happens can be neatly boxed and labeled. I've gone back to that house many times since. My grandparents still live there. The backyard looks the same. The trees are a bit taller now. The fence was replaced a few years ago, but it still feels the same. And every time I look out those windows at night, a small part of me braces for another flash, another shake, another night where reality bends just a little. But it never came again. Whatever it was, it happened once and never again. I think about that more than anything. It didn't build up. It didn't return. Just a single moment that left 10 kids changed, confused, and still wondering 10 years later. Maybe it was just one of those moments. A freak one in a million thing. Maybe someone out there knows exactly what it was and just never said. But we were there. We felt it. We saw it. We remember it. And the scariest part is knowing we may never really understand what happened that night. I was in my final year of nursing school when it happened. Back then, I was doing my clinical rotation on a medical surgical floor in a busy urban hospital. It was one of those old buildings that had been renovated so many times that the hallways twisted like a maze, and every floor felt like a slightly different era. The walls were clean but dull, the lighting always just a little too dim, and the hum of machines never stopped. There was a woman on the floor named Mrs. Allen. She was in her early 80s, quiet, dignified. Her chart said she had multiple chronic illnesses: congestive heart failure, diabetes, chronic kidney disease. She was alert when I first met her, her eyes sharp despite her frail appearance. What stood out the most was the bold red sticker on her chart and wristband, DNR. Do not resuscitate. I remember looking at that sticker and feeling the weight of it, the finality. But she had made her choice, and that meant something. I respected it. Every nurse on the floor respected it. She had been clear with the doctors, the nurses, the social workers. No resuscitation, no life support. She wanted to go naturally if it came to that. About 2 weeks into my rotation, something changed. Mrs. Allen became confused. She stopped recognizing people. She started speaking in broken phrases and staring into corners like she was seeing something none of us could. It was likely delirium, not uncommon for patients her age, especially given her health issues. They ran tests, looked for infections, electrolyte imbalances, but everything came back inconclusive. She just wasn't the same anymore. Not long after, her children came in. 3 of them, 2 sons and a daughter. They looked like they hadn't visited in a while. One of the nurses said they lived out of state. They came in with stacks of paperwork, one of which granted them durable power of attorney. Apparently, Mrs. Allen had signed it years ago, back when she was still completely lucid. That's when the code status changed, from DNR to full code. I remember watching one of the nurses peel off the red sticker and replace it with a green one. Full code. It didn't feel right. We all knew she never wanted that. But legally, our hands were tied. The children had power of attorney, and they wanted everything done to keep their mother alive. I tried to tell myself it wasn't my place. I was still a student. I was there to learn, to follow instructions, but it sat heavy in my stomach, a quiet unease. A few nights later, it was my turn to shadow the night shift. Mrs. Allen was restless. She kept trying to get out of bed. Her breathing was labored, her skin pale. Her oxygen saturation kept dipping. The nurse I was assigned to kept a close eye on her. Around 3 a.m., the alarm started going off. She went into VFib, ventricular fibrillation. No pulse, no breathing. The nurse immediately started CPR while shouting for the code team. I stood by, watching everything we've been taught in class unfold in real life. Chest compressions, airway support, the crash cart rolling in, everyone taking their places with precision and urgency. The doctor arrived. He grabbed the paddles, checked the leads, and yelled for a shock. The machine didn't respond. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. The defibrillator was on. The leads were attached. The monitor showed VFib clearly. But when he hit the button, it just beeped uselessly. The respiratory therapist checked the connections. Another nurse checked the power cord. Everything was plugged in. Everything was in place. Still, it wouldn't deliver a shock. The doctor cursed under his breath. He tried the backup machine. Same issue. The room was tense, frantic. People were doing chest compressions, pushing epinephrine, calling for another crash cart. Minutes passed. Every attempt to shock her failed. Then, just like that, her heart rhythm flatlined. Asystole. The monitor showed a straight line. No electrical activity. No pulse. No breathing. She was gone. We kept trying for a few more minutes. Another dose of epinephrine. More compressions. But nothing changed. Finally, the doctor called time of death. As we stood there in that small, crowded room, sweat beading on our foreheads, gloves sticky with effort, someone noticed the machine. The defibrillator lit up and made a soft, ready tone. The shock button illuminated. The machine was suddenly working, perfectly functional. Everyone just stood there for a second. The same machine, same setup, same patient, but now it worked. After she was already gone, the attending nurse said softly, "It's working now," and looked at the doctor, who said nothing. He just walked out. The rest of us followed, silent. The hospital checked the defibrillator the next morning. Biomedical engineering ran tests. They reviewed the logs. Everything checked out. No errors, no fallos. It was as if the machine had never malfunctioned. Word spread quickly. Everyone on that shift was disturbed. It wasn't just a random machine failure. These devices were checked every single day. It was someone's job to make sure they worked. In all my time on that floor, before and after that night, I never saw a defibrillator fail like that again. Mrs. Allen got what she wanted. No resuscitation. No machines keeping her alive. It didn't happen the way anyone expected. But in the end, her wishes were respected. Or maybe enforced. I don't know. After I graduated, I came back to that hospital to work full-time. For years, I walked the same halls, treated hundreds of patients. I never forgot Mrs. Allen. Some nights, when I worked late, I would pass the room she had been in. The bed had long since been changed. Patients had come and gone, but I would still think of her. Not because of ghosts or anything like that, but because her case reminded me of something that's easy to forget in medicine. Behind every chart, every diagnosis, is a person. A person with wishes, fears, and the right to choose how their life ends. Her story taught me that sometimes, even when everything around you says to intervene, the most powerful thing you can do is listen. I never talked about it much. Most people wouldn't understand, or they'd try to make it something it wasn't. But for me, it was a turning point. It changed how I saw nursing. It changed how I saw death. I've been a nurse for over 20 years now. I've seen a lot, code blues, miracles, tragedies. But nothing has ever stayed with me like that night. Not because it was the scariest thing that ever happened, but because it was real, completely real, and no one could explain it. We still don't know why the defibrillator failed. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there was a glitch we didn't catch. But deep down, I think Mrs. Allen made her choice known, in her own way, and somehow the world listened. When I was a child, we lived in an old Victorian house tucked away at the edge of a small town. The house was massive, way too big for just the two of us, but my mom got it for a really low price. She said it was because it needed work, but I never really understood what kind of work that was. From the outside, it looked like something out of an old movie, with chipped white paint, wooden columns, and big windows with thick curtains. The garden was always overgrown, the grass always longer than it should have been, like the house had been forgotten. I was about 5 or 6 when I first noticed the laughter. I'd be in bed, tucked under the heavy blankets, trying to sleep while the wind made the windows rattle. I'd stare at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift, and then I'd hear it. Like high-pitched giggles like kids playing just outside my door. At first, I thought it was the TV. Sometimes my mom fell asleep on the couch with it on, and old shows would keep playing late into the night. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't coming from downstairs. It was right outside my room, in the hallway. I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I closed my eyes tighter and tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But the laughing kept happening. Not every night, but enough. And it wasn't just a sound anymore. I started feeling weird, like I wasn't alone in the house, even though it was just my mom and me. One night, I got brave enough to open the door and look. The hallway was dark. We didn't leave lights on at night, and there was only a small window at the end of the hall that let in a bit of moonlight. I stood there, waiting, listening. Nothing, just silence. But as soon as I got back in bed, I heard the laughter again. This time, softer, like it was right behind the wall. I told my mom the next morning. She brushed it off, said I had a big imagination, said it was probably just the TV or the wind, or maybe even the old pipes in the walls. The house was old, after all, but there was something in her voice, like she didn't fully believe what she was saying. Like she was trying to convince herself, too. Things got worse after that. The laughter didn't stop, and it started happening more often. I began to dread going to bed. Some nights, I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the door, waiting. I stopped sleeping properly. I was tired all the time, and I started getting headaches. Mom noticed, but there wasn't much she could do. She worked long hours, and we didn't have anyone else. No family close by, no friends in the area. It was just us in the house. Then came the night I'll never forget. I had fallen asleep early for once. I remember dreaming about something strange. Can't remember what it was, but it wasn't a nightmare. It was just odd. Then I woke up suddenly. Not because of a noise, but because I felt something. Pressure. I opened my eyes and tried to sit up, but I couldn't. There was weight on my shoulders, like someone was holding me down. At first I thought it was the blanket, maybe twisted around me. But it wasn't that. It felt like fingers digging into me, pressing me down into the mattress. I couldn't see anything. The room was dark, and my chest started to feel tight. I was frozen with fear. And then I heard it, the laughing. But this time, it wasn't in the hallway. It was in my room, right beside me. High-pitched and cold, like it wasn't laughing with me. It was laughing at me. I started to scream. I screamed until my throat burned, until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I heard footsteps, and then the bedside lamp clicked on. My mom was there, panicked, pulling me upright. I could move again, but my shoulders were burning. I told her my shoulders hurt. She looked scared, like really scared. She lifted up my t-shirt, and I remember the way her face changed. All the color drained out of it. She didn't say anything, just stared. I looked down and saw it too. 2 handprints, clear as day, big ones, adult-sized, red, like they'd been pressed hard into my skin. She didn't talk much that night, just held me and rocked me until I fell asleep again. She kept the light on. I remember that clearly. She never used to keep the light on, but that night she did. And after that, she started sleeping on the floor in my room. We never talked about it. Not properly. She said it must have been a bad dream, and that maybe I'd scratched myself or something. But the prints didn't look like scratches. They looked like bruises. After a few weeks, things seemed to settle down. The laughter stopped. I still felt uneasy in the house, like it was watching me, but nothing else happened. Eventually, my mom moved us out. She said we needed to be closer to her job, but I think it was more than that. I think she knew something was wrong with that place. Years passed. I forgot about it, or at least I told myself I did. I went to school, made friends, tried to live like a normal kid. But every once in a while, I'd hear a laugh that sounded too familiar, or feel that same pressure on my shoulders when I woke up in the nightmare. Then just a few months ago, I was visiting my mom. We were talking about old times, and I brought up the house. Just a passing comment. I said something like, "Remember that old place with the weird laughter?" She froze. Like actually froze. She stopped moving, stopped talking. Just stared at me. Then she said, quietly, "I don't want to remember that." That was it. No explanation. No discussion. Just that one sentence. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just me. I hadn't imagined it. Something happened in that house. Something real. She remembered. She'd been trying to forget, trying to protect me from it. But it had left a mark on both of us. I've thought a lot about it since then. Try to make sense of it. I still don't know what caused it. Maybe it was someone who lived there before us. Maybe something happened in that house that left some kind of scar. Not a ghost, not a demon, nothing like that. Just something real. Someone who had once been there. Someone who left behind pain or cruelty so deep that it lingered. Somehow. Not a spirit, but a memory with weight. The house was old. Maybe it had seen things. Maybe it made people feel things. Maybe someone lived there before, someone angry or sick, and those feelings seeped into the walls. All I know is that what I felt was real. What I heard was real. The pain in my shoulders, the way my mom looked at those marks, her silence, even now, it's all real. I don't live in houses like that anymore. I like small places, new places. Places with no history. I sleep with noise machines on. I double check the locks. I keep lights nearby. And when I wake up at night, I always check the shadows. I never heard the laughter again. Not like that. Not so close. But sometimes when I'm very tired or the wind hits the windows just right, I think I can feel it. The weight on my shoulders. Just for a second. Then it's gone. And I remind myself it's over. It's in the past. But I'll never forget. Neither will she. I was 16 when it happened. I still remember the exact night. Not the date, but everything about it. The way the air felt heavy. Almost like the house itself was holding its breath. I was staying at my grandparents' place for the weekend, and my grandmother was sharing the room with me. She had trouble with her legs and didn't like sleeping upstairs, so we both took the downstairs guest room. I had the bed closer to the door, and she slept further in, near the wall. That night, I stayed up a little longer than I should have, scrolling through my phone. Eventually, I dozed off with the screen still on. I had left my clothes drying over the door frame, like I always did after doing laundry. Just a shirt and some jeans hanging on hangers, swaying gently in the night air from the slightly cracked window. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up. I don't know what pulled me out of sleep, but my eyes just opened on their own like I had heard something without actually hearing it. It was that thick silence where even your own breathing feels too loud. For a few seconds, I stared at the ceiling in confusion, still half asleep, my body heavy with tiredness. Then I noticed movement just barely at the door. It was the clothes. They were swaying again, not just from the breeze, but being touched, rustled, moved around. I blinked, trying to figure out what I was seeing. Maybe my grandmother had gotten up. Maybe something was brushing against them from the hallway. I squinted, trying to focus. That's when I saw the legs. Gray, long, skinny, veino legs. They looked wrong, like they belonged to something sick, starved. They were standing behind the clothes, half blocked by the shirt. At first, I thought maybe I was still dreaming, like I was in some sort of sleep paralysis. I tried moving my fingers and toes to snap out of it, but I wasn't frozen. I was awake. I shifted up on my elbows and rubbed my eyes. The clothes parted slightly from the movement, and that's when I saw him fully. He wasn't human, not even close. His body was stick-thin, like bones with skin stretched over them. But his stomach bulged out unnaturally, swollen like he was filled with gas or something rotten. His skin had a gray tint, and I could see the veins running through it, thin lines pulsing slowly. His arms hung low, and the things I'd seen moving through the clothes weren't sticks. They were his fingers, long, bony, and far too many joints in each one. They moved like insect legs, twitching and weaving through the fabric like he was searching for something. His face was what made me feel truly sick. His chin was long, like it had been stretched, and his mouth was tiny, puckered in the center of his face like he was sucking on an invisible straw. His lips kept twitching like he was eating something that wasn't there. The eyes, God, the eyes, were huge and round and wide open, with no lids at all. They didn't blink. They were dry and shiny and fixed directly on me. And he knew. He knew I could see him. He didn't move. He didn't run or attack. He just stared. I stared back, frozen in place. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like my ribs would break. I wanted to scream, to yell for my grandmother, who was asleep just 10 feet away. But the fear had a grip on my chest like a fist. I forced myself to move. I reached behind me and started shaking her shoulder hard, still staring at the thing. I didn't want to look away. Every instinct in me told me not to. I didn't blink. My hand was shaking as I pushed at her. Eventually, she stirred, just a groan at first. Then she sat up a little and looked at me, confused. I looked back at the door. He was gone, just like that. No sound, no movement, no sign, just gone. The clothes hung still, like nothing had touched them at all. I couldn't explain what I saw to her. I didn't even try. I just said I had a nightmare and couldn't sleep, and she let me crawl into the bed next to her like I was a little kid again. But that wasn't the beginning. And unfortunately, it wasn't the end either. In the weeks leading up to that night, strange things had already been happening in the house. At first, it was little stuff. My bedroom door would slam shut out of nowhere, even when no windows were open. I'd be watching TV or reading, and the door would suddenly click and swing shut with a loud bang. Sometimes it even locked itself, and I'd have to yell for someone to let me out. Then came a touch. I don't even like thinking about it now, but one night I woke up to what felt like hands on my feet. Multiple hands, cold, dry, and slow, moving over my ankles and up my legs like they were trying to see if I was awake. The moment I sat up, the feeling stopped, but I couldn't see anything. The room was empty. I told myself it was just sleep paralysis, maybe a leftover dream. But the way it felt, it wasn't like a dream. It was too real. The texture of the skin, the weight of the fingers. Real. I started having terrible nightmares too. Ones where I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. The kind of dreams that you don't forget even after you've been awake for hours. One night, I dreamed that someone was whispering in my ear in a language I didn't know. Over and over again, this deep, rasping voice just inches from my face. I woke up to find my ear cold to the touch, like someone had been breathing on it. After I saw that thing, I broke. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I told my parents everything. My dad didn't say much, but I could tell he believed me more than he let on. My mom called someone from the church, and within a few days, a man came to our house with a bottle of holy water and a serious look on his face. He didn't do anything dramatic, no chanting or smoke or candles. Just walked room to room, said a few prayers, and sprinkled water around the corners. He stayed quiet the whole time. I didn't feel anything change while he was doing it. But after he left, the air in the house felt lighter. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up. No footsteps, no hands, no eyes watching me from the dark. Maybe it worked. Maybe it was just the comfort of having done something, anything that gave me peace of mind. I don't know. I was a stressed out kid dealing with more than I could really understand at the time. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe my mind created something out of stress and fear and loneliness. But that thing looked surprised that I saw it. That part sticks with me the most. Like it wasn't supposed to be seen. Like it had always been there, hiding, watching, just out of reach. And the moment our eyes met, it was as shocked as I was. After that night, I made one rule for myself. Never sleep with the door open. Not ever again. I still think about that thing sometimes, especially in the middle of the night, when I wake up thirsty or hear a floorboard creak. My eyes go straight to the doorway. Even now, years later, I half expect to see those gray, veiny legs standing there again. That swollen stomach, that tiny mouth, those huge, unblinking eyes. But I haven't seen him since. And honestly, I hope I never do. When I was about 7 years old, my world was still small. It was made up of the dusty roads behind our neighborhood, the rusted out sheds near the field, and the overgrown paths leading to this unofficial motocross area everyone just called the trails. It was this wide, open patch of uneven ground, rutted with old tire tracks, half-dug pits, and broken boards left behind from kids trying to build ramps. The kind of place where your parents would probably forbid you to play, but that made it all the more exciting. My two older brothers and I used to go there all the time. It was kind of our escape from the boring routines of home, where we were always told to stay clean or be quiet or do our homework. Out there, we could do whatever we wanted. We didn't have bikes ourselves, at least not the kind you'd race. The kids who rode motocross would sometimes fly through, revving their engines and kicking up dirt like they were gods of speed. But most of the time it was quiet, abandoned, just wind through the weeds, the buzz of distant power lines, and the crunch of gravel under our shoes. One day, we were just messing around like usual, throwing rocks, making up stories, climbing the packed dirt mounds people had built up. I don't remember who brought up the idea. Maybe it was my middle brother who always had the stupidest but most exciting suggestions. We dig a tunnel, not just a little hole. A real tunnel, like a passage underground. For what? No reason. We didn't need a reason. That was the beauty of being a kid. The world didn't have to make sense. We just wanted to do it. We wanted to see if we could. The dirt there was dry, packed hard, but not like concrete. With enough patience and energy, we could dig. We used our hands at first, then found some sticks and metal scraps lying around, and eventually got hold of a bent garden trowel someone had thrown away. We took turns digging. My brothers did the first part while I kept lookout, though looking back, there wasn't anything to watch for. No one cared what we did out there. Hour by hour, we carved out the tunnel. It was only about 2 feet high inside, just big enough for one of us to crawl through on our stomachs. And maybe 6 feet in, not straight like a pipe, but crooked and uneven, shaped more like a rabbit burrow. The opening was a mess of kicked up dust and old grass roots sticking out like wire. The inside was warm and smelled like dry earth and sweat. I remember thinking how amazing it was that we'd made something like this. It wasn't pretty, but it was ours. I was proud in that dumb way kids get proud of something dangerous. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My arms were scratched from dragging myself forward through the tight dirt walls. But I didn't care. I was having fun. It was sometime in the late afternoon, maybe around 4 or 5. The sun was still out, bright but starting to dip, casting long shadows over the field. My brothers were outside, just sitting in the grass, drinking from an old water bottle. I wanted one more crawl through the tunnel, just to see how far I could get. Maybe push it a few more inches deeper. I wiggled in on my stomach, elbows pulling me forward the same way we always did it. I remember the moment it happened. The exact second. There wasn't a sound, no warning. Just this sudden, unbelievable pressure. I felt it all at once, something giving way over my head. The ceiling of dirt crumbled in a single breath and slammed down around me. I didn't even have time to yell. The weight crushed me into the ground. Not just heavy, not just hard. It was like the earth itself wanted to press me out of existence. My mouth was open from shock, so the soil filled it instantly. My eyes squeezed shut on instinct. My body tensed, twisted, tried to move, but there was no room. My arms were bent awkwardly under me, and even though my hands were close to my face, I couldn't move them. Not an inch. Every bit of my body was locked in place by thousands of pounds of dirt. At first, I didn't feel fear, just confusion. My brain couldn't even register what had happened. The world had been light and dusty, and now it was dark and heavy and tight and hot. It hit me. Not a thought, but a raw feeling that climbed up my throat like bile. I was buried alive. Buried. Alive. I started to panic. My heart went into overdrive, pounding so hard in my chest, I could feel it in my ears. I tried to scream, but I couldn't open my mouth without choking. I couldn't even breathe properly. The air was thick with dirt and dust. I inhaled once, and the grit clogged my throat. I coughed, which made my stomach contract, and that made it even harder to breathe. Every tiny movement just packed the soil tighter around me. My ribs screamed with pressure. My eyes watered. My nose was running. It felt like every opening in my face was filling up with earth. The heat was unbearable. I don't know why it got so hot. Maybe because there was no air circulation, or maybe because I was panicking. It felt like being locked inside an oven. My skin burned. Sweat poured from me, but it had nowhere to go, mixing with the dirt and turning it into a kind of gritty paste around my face. I couldn't wipe it away. I couldn't blink. I couldn't even swallow. I was 7 years old, and I thought I was dying. Everything went black, not just visually, but in my mind too. I couldn't hear my brothers. I couldn't feel the air. I wasn't even sure which way was up. Time stopped being something I could understand. It could have been 30 seconds or 3 hours. My mind was splitting open from the terror. Then something even worse happened. Everything turned red. It wasn't literal. I don't mean I opened my eyes and saw red. My eyes were shut so tight they hurt. But in my mind, this deep red glow started to creep into the darkness. Like all the black was being replaced by blood. My head throbbed with pressure. I could hear my own pulse crashing like waves. The heat, the color, the silence. It all came together in my young brain in the worst possible way. I thought I was in hell. I really believed it. I thought I had died, that the tunnel had collapsed and killed me, and now I was in hell. Buried in it. Maybe this was what it was. Eternal suffocation. Trapped forever. Unable to scream or cry or even think clearly. My child brain couldn't understand physics or oxygen deprivation or heat exhaustion. All I knew was that I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, and everything inside and outside of me was screaming. That's when the tears started, though I couldn't feel them. My eyes were clenched, but the tears forced their way out, mixing with the dirt, stinging and useless. I remember wanting my mom. I wanted to go home and sit on the couch and watch cartoons and eat something sweet. I wanted to be anywhere but there. But there was no anywhere anymore. There was only the dirt and the pressure and the panic. Then something grabbed my foot. It wasn't gentle. It was sudden, fast, and rough, like someone yanking me back from the edge of a cliff. At first, I panicked more, thinking maybe I was being pulled deeper. But then I felt it again. A hand, small but strong, gripping my ankle and tugging. Then another hand. Then the sound of muffled voices, muffled but real. Actual sound, not just the pounding inside my head. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was imagining it, but the hands were real. They were tugging hard, and then I felt some of the pressure shift. Dirt moved away from my back, then my legs, then my hips. Inch by inch, I was being pulled backward, dragged out of my earthen grave. When my face finally broke free, I couldn't see anything at first. The sunlight burned through my eyelids like fire. I coughed, spat, gasped, but my throat was too raw to draw in air right. My chest convulsed. I was choking on everything. My arms were jelly, my face scratched and caked in mud. But I was out. I lay there on the ground, belly down, gasping like a fish. My brothers were shouting, but their words didn't mean anything. I didn't care what they were saying. I just needed to breathe. Eventually, after I could sit up, they helped pour water over my head and back. We didn't talk. Not really. We were all in shock in our own ways. They looked scared, more scared than I'd ever seen them. And that made it worse somehow. Seeing your older brothers look like they had seen something they couldn't explain, like they had almost lost you. We didn't tell our parents. Not because we thought it was funny or cool, but because we knew they'd never let us go back there again. And as stupid as it sounds, we still wanted to go back. Not to dig tunnels. Never again. But that place was our escape, and we weren't ready to give it up. I walked home in silence. My clothes were stiff with dry dirt. My skin was raw. My throat was scratched up from the inside. I got hosed down in the backyard. My mom just thought we'd been wrestling or rolling around like usual. She didn't ask questions. But that night, when I laid in bed, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red again. I felt the weight. I heard the silence. I didn't sleep properly for weeks. Even now, as an adult, I can still feel that moment. When I close my eyes tight, sometimes I get a flicker of that suffocating darkness. That panic, that red. I've read stories about people being buried alive, and every time I feel this deep, sick knot in my gut, because I know what that's like. I've been there, even if it was only for a minute or two. It doesn't matter how long it actually lasted. It changed something in me, and we never dug another tunnel again. When I was in elementary school, I lived with my family in an old colonial-style house. It was one of those homes people like to slow down and look at when they drove past. The paint was always fresh, the porch railings were always clean and straight, and the floors inside were the original soft wood about 2 centuries old. My parents were really into keeping everything historically correct. They spent a lot of time and money making sure it all looked just like it would have when it was built. The house had 3 bedrooms, which was enough when I was little. But once my brother hit middle school and started demanding his own space, my parents decided it was time to add on to the house. They hired an architect and started planning a large addition, an extra bedroom, a bathroom, and a small family room off the back of the house. That was when the weirdness started. At first, it was just slow. The original contractor they hired always seemed to be behind on everything. He was an older man, kind of gruff, and didn't really explain much to my parents. He kept saying things like we're waiting on permits, or the wood hasn't come in yet. But months passed, and hardly anything happened. What made things even more frustrating was that they kept paying him regularly. He'd send invoices, and my parents, not wanting to cause a scene or ruin the working relationship, kept paying. But the house stayed exactly the same. After about a year of almost nothing being done, my parents finally let him go. They were really upset, especially because the contractor didn't want to follow the design my mom had in mind. She wanted all the trim in the new part of the house to be painted to match the rest of the home, even though they had paid for high quality wood. He thought it was a waste to paint over it. That became a major point of conflict. My parents insisted, and he refused. So after months of back and forth, he was gone. We lived in a really hot and humid part of the country. Summers felt like the air was thick enough to chew. Still, we stayed in that half-finished house while they looked for someone new. Eventually, my parents' lawyer recommended a contractor he knew from his church. He vouched for him personally and said he had a good team of workers. The new contractor agreed to take on the project, and almost immediately, things started moving again. Wood was delivered. Drywall started going up. The crew was small, usually about 4 or 5 men on any given day. The actual contractor rarely came by, which I remember even as a kid thinking was strange. Instead, he sent one of his guys to run the job. That guy was named Kenny. Kenny was tall and had a bit of a pot belly. He always wore a baseball cap, and I remember thinking he looked kind of like a coach or a gym teacher. He was always smiling, always saying hi to me when I came outside. My mom made it a point to be polite to the workers. Since it was so hot out, she would send me outside with lemonade, water, or iced tea, whatever we had. Sometimes I'd bring them cookies or crackers, especially on weekends when I was off school. Kenny was always nice to me, like really nice. He'd ask me what I was reading or what shows I liked. He'd ask me how school was going. I was 9 at the time, and to me, it was just a friendly grown-up being kind. I didn't think much of it. He'd also give me updates on the house sometimes, like, we're putting the insulation today, or this room's gonna be your brother's, huh? I like the attention. When you're a kid and a grown-up pays attention to you, it feels special. Looking back now, I realize he never acted weird in front of my parents. Just around me, when it was just the two of us. There were even times when my mom or dad had to run errands and left me and my brother home while the workers were there. My brother was 2 grades ahead of me and would usually be in his room with the door closed, playing video games or texting his friends. That meant I was often left to my own devices, wandering the house or watching TV in the living room while grown men worked just outside. At one point, I remember Kenny knocking gently on the back door and motioning for me to come out. I opened it, and he smiled and handed me a paint sample, asking me which color I liked better. He made me feel like I was helping make decisions. I told my mom about it later, and she just smiled and said, "That's nice of him to ask your opinion." Eventually, the addition was done. It took about 2.5 years from the time they first started with the old contractor. My brother got his own room. We had a new bathroom, and the family room had big windows that looked out into the yard. Everything looked clean and new, but still in line with the rest of the historic look. After the work was finished, life returned to normal. The crew packed up, and we didn't see them again. My parents were relieved to finally have it done, and I don't think they ever talked to the contractor again after the final payment was sent. It was like the workers had never even been there. Then one day, a few months later, something happened that completely changed how I remembered that time in our lives. My dad was reading the newspaper on a Sunday morning, like he always did. I was eating cereal, and my mom was making coffee. I remember the exact moment he lowered the paper, looked over his glasses at my mom, and said, "Is this the same Kenny who worked on the house?" My mom walked over and took the paper from him. Her eyes moved quickly over the page. Then she stopped and just stared at it. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. I kept eating, not really understanding what was going on. Then she sat down, slowly, and said, "Oh my God." I got up and walked over. The newspaper article had a photo, and I recognized the face immediately. It was Kenny. The same baseball cap, same slightly awkward smile. The headline said something about an arrest, and as I read more, I started to feel sick. He had been arrested for possession of illegal materials involving children. Multiple counts. They'd also found evidence that he had been contacting kids online, using fake profiles, and arranging meetings. The article said he had a prior record. He was already on a list of registered sex offenders before he ever worked at our house. My parents were quiet for the rest of the morning. I don't think I really understood what it all meant at the time. I just knew it was bad. I knew that the man who used to smile at me and talk to me about cartoons and bring me pieces of scrap would have drawn and done something really, really wrong. Later, I overheard my mom on the phone. She was yelling. I think she was talking to their lawyer, the one who had recommended the contractor. She kept asking how it was possible that no one knew. The answer, apparently, was that the contractor never did a background check on Kenny. Or if he did, he didn't care. It's hard to describe the way I started to think about that whole period differently after that. All the little memories started to feel wrong. Him calling me out to the yard. Him smiling too much. Him always asking where my parents were. The way he'd offer to show me how tools worked or let me help with things. Nothing ever happened to me, physically, but emotionally, something broke. I started having trouble sleeping. I kept picturing him standing at our back door, waiting for me to answer. I started locking the doors when my parents left the house, even if it was just for a few minutes. I didn't want to go into the family room anymore, even though it was brand new and had a big TV. I kept looking around, wondering if he had ever taken pictures of the inside of our house, if he'd ever thought about coming back. My parents became really strict after that. They never left us home alone again, not until we were much older. They had security cameras installed around the outside of the house. And I noticed that anytime a repairman came by, my mom would always stay close, offering coffee, pretending to tidy up, but really just watching. I never saw Kenny again, of course. He went to prison. I don't know how long for, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he had been there, in our home, around me, and no one knew what he was capable of. I think about that a lot. even now. Not in a horror movie way. Not like a jump scare or a ghost story. Just a plain, cold reality of how close he was. How normal he seemed. How easy he was to miss. People always say, nothing happened, so it's okay. But something did happen. It changed the way I looked at the world. At people. At my own childhood. And I can't ever unsee it. When I was about 13 years old, our dog ran away from home. It wasn't the first time it happened. We lived in a neighborhood that was decent enough, nothing particularly dangerous, just your average quiet suburban area. Most of the houses had backyards, small fences, and driveways full of the same kinds of cars. Our dog, a small white mutt with a curly tail and way too much energy, had a habit of slipping out when the back gate wasn't shut properly. It didn't even take much, a strong gust of wind, or someone being too lazy to hear the latch click. She would bolt out, full of joy like she'd been set free from prison, and go exploring the alleys and sidewalks nearby. Usually, it wasn't a big deal. I'd grab a leash and head out, and within 10 or 15 minutes, I'd find her sniffing through trash bins behind someone's garage or trotting along a fence line like she had business to do. She'd see me, freeze for a moment, and then come running right back, wagging her tail like crazy. We'd head home, and that would be that. No harm done. This time, though, was different. The day started out like any other. My mom was yelling about dishes in the sink. My little sister was glued to the TV watching cartoons, and I was supposed to be cleaning my room. I remember glancing out the back window and seeing the gate swinging just slightly in the wind. My stomach sank a bit. I rushed out the back door, calling our dog's name, hoping maybe she hadn't noticed yet. She was gone. I checked up and down the street. No sign of her. I ran around the corner, checked the park, walked through the usual alleys she'd liked, peeked into yards where she'd been before. Nothing. It was hot out, middle of summer, and I could feel the sweat soaking through the back of my shirt. I was getting more and more nervous with each street I crossed, each block I wandered down. I didn't have a phone back then, so I couldn't just call for help. I had to rely on my eyes, ears, and voice. I kept calling her name over and over, feeling more and more stupid when people looked out their windows or glanced at me from their porches. After maybe 45 minutes, I started to think I might have to go home and just wait for her to come back. That had never happened before. She always came when I found her, but now I wasn't finding her. I tried to remember every path, every block she'd ever wandered to. Nothing felt right. I ended up nearly 6 blocks from home. It was farther than she'd ever gone. I was about to turn back when I passed a set of older townhomes. They were rental properties, the kind with peeling paint and junk in the front yards. A lot of them had fences around small backyards, mostly made of wood. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Then I heard something, a yip. I froze. Then I heard it again, faint but real. A short bark, high-pitched, muffled by something. My heart started pounding. I turned toward the sound, which was coming from one of the fenced yards. I stepped closer. The fence was tall, but not too tall for me to look through the slats. I moved slowly, peeking between the boards until I saw movement. A blur of white fur. My dog. She was there. She looked filthy, muddy, wet, her fur clumped and dirty. She was chained to a post in the corner of the yard, tugging and straining toward the fence. When she saw me, she started barking like crazy, pulling at the chain so hard that her whole body jerked forward and back. I didn't understand. Who would chain her up like that? Why? I looked at the house. It was an older one, paint flaking from the siding, blinds drawn shut. I couldn't see anyone moving inside, but I heard voices, yelling, maybe in another language. My throat was dry. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. No answer. I waited about 20 seconds. Then I rang again, louder this time. Finally, the door cracked open, just a sliver. An older man, maybe in his 60s, peeked out at me. He was Asian, short hair, thin face, wearing a tank top and loose pants. He looked at me with this expression I still can't fully describe. Like I was an inconvenience. Like he was sizing me up and already didn't like what he saw. Yes, he said. I tried to keep my voice calm. Hi. I think you have my dog. She ran away, and I just saw her in your backyard. The little white dog? That's her, I swear. He just stared at me. Then he said, what dog? I blinked. The white dog in your backyard. She has a red collar with her tags on it. She's mine. He frowned, looked past me like I was wasting his time. We have no dog here, he said, and he tried to close the door. I panicked and stuck my foot in the doorway. My heart was racing. I wasn't trying to be rude, but my dog was right there. I just saw her. She's barking right now. Please, I said. She's in your backyard, chained to a post. He looked toward the side yard, where you could see the corner of the fence. The barking was obvious now. He couldn't deny it. He sighed, almost like he was annoyed that I wouldn't go away. Oh, that dog, he said. His voice was so flat, like it meant nothing. Then he shut the door. I stood there in stunned silence. I didn't know what to do. My legs felt like they were full of jelly. After a few seconds, I ran around the side of the house. I was ready to hop the fence. My hands were already on the wood when I saw him again, this time through the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. He came out slowly, holding something in his hand, keys maybe. My dog backed up as he approached her. She looked terrified, not just nervous, but really scared. Her tail was tucked, ears down, eyes wide. She whimpered as he bent down and unclipped the chain from her collar. Then he walked over and opened the gate without a word. She didn't even hesitate. She bolted straight for me, running so fast she almost knocked me over. I knelt down, caught her, and held her tight. She was shaking. I could feel her heartbeat pounding through her ribs. I looked up and the man was already walking back inside. He didn't look at me, didn't say a thing. He just slid the door shut behind him. I stood there for a few seconds, holding my dog, feeling more confused and unsettled than I ever had before. The walk home was quiet. I didn't even want to talk to anyone when I got back. I rinsed her off in the yard with a garden hose. Her fur was covered in mud and smelled weird, like mildew or something worse. I dried her off as best I could with an old towel and just sat with her under the tree for a while. She wouldn't leave my side after that. Not for days. She followed me everywhere, even sat outside the bathroom door when I showered. And whenever the back gate was open, even a little, she never ran out again. Not once. A few times she got outside when we left the door open, but she stayed right by the fence, just waiting. Once we found her sitting by the gate, like she was guarding it. I never told my parents the full story. I said I found her wandering by the townhomes, chained up. I didn't mention a man, or how he tried to deny she was there, or how scared she looked. I didn't know how to explain it. I wasn't sure they'd believe me. Even now, all these years later, I still think about it sometimes. I think about how far I walked, how close I was to giving up. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found her that day. If I'd gone home 10 minutes earlier, would she still be there? Would she have been dumped somewhere? Hurt? That man never said he found her. Never acted like it was a mistake. It didn't feel like a misunderstanding. It felt deliberate. And that feeling she had, that fear when he walked out with her, that wasn't something you fake. I don't know what his plan was, or if he even had one. But I found her, and I brought her home. After that day, she never ran away again.